You've been lied to about life. They told you it should make sense, move faster, reward effort immediately, and give you clear signs when you're doing things right. They said that if you were on the right path, you'd feel confident, certain, and always one step ahead. But if that were true, why does life keep slowing you down? Why do the paths you never planned, the pauses you didn't ask for, and the delays you resent the most end up shaping you deeper than anything you chose? Why does not knowing hurt more than failing? Why does waiting feel heavier than moving in the wrong direction? The truth is, life is not something you control. It's something you learn to trust. And trust doesn't mean clarity, guarantees, or perfect timing. It means staying open even when the road stretches longer than expected and refusing to turn doubt into self-betrayal. The long way is not wrong. It is not life working against you. It is life working on you. It is building strength you cannot rush, teaching lessons shortcuts destroy, and preparing you for outcomes you are not yet ready to carry. Every pause, every detour, every stretch of confusion is shaping the version of you that will eventually arrive. The wisest minds understood this. They didn't demand answers from life. They cultivated patience, steadiness, and the courage to keep walking forward without proof. And as you listen now, something begins to settle. The pressure to hurry softens. Your breath slows. Your mind stops asking, "What's wrong with me?" You begin to feel a quiet knowing that you are not late, not lost, not broken. You are being guided. This is not false comfort. This is not pretending everything is easy. This is learning to trust life even when it takes the long way. Because sometimes the long way is not a delay at all. It is the only path that leads you exactly where you need to be. Are you ready? Let's begin. Something still lingers after the introduction. A quiet question remains in the air. If the long way is right, then why does it hurt so much while you're inside it? Why does delay feel personal, like rejection, like life is ignoring your effort? This is where trust is tested the hardest, not when things fall apart loudly, but when nothing seems to move at all. And this is where understanding begins to deepen, not through answers, but through awareness. Delay is one of the most misunderstood experiences of being human. When progress slows or disappears, the mind immediately searches for blame. You assume you did something wrong. You assume you missed your chance. You assume others are moving ahead while you are standing still. But life does not delay randomly, and it does not delay out of cruelty. Delay is not a punishment. It is a form of intelligence. A quiet one, a patient one that sees further than your current desire. Most people believe progress should match effort. If you work hard, results should come quickly. If you care deeply, life should respond immediately. But life does not operate on emotional urgency. It operates on readiness. And readiness is not the same as desire. You can want something deeply and still not be able to hold it without breaking yourself. When life delays progress, it is often protecting your identity from collapsing under weight it cannot yet support. Identity collapse happens when your outer life changes faster than your inner structure. It happens when you gain success before you develop stability, when responsibility arrives before self-trust, when visibility comes before clarity, when power comes before humility. On the outside, it looks like winning. On the inside, it feels like fragmentation. Many people who get what they want too early do not recognize the damage right away. They think discomfort is just pressure. They think anxiety is normal. They think numbness is the price of achievement. But what is really happening is misalignment. Their external role is expanding faster than their internal capacity. And the nervous system knows this before the mind does. It responds with fear, exhaustion, and a constant sense of being unsafe, even in success. Delay exists to slow this process down. It gives your inner world time to reorganize. It strengthens emotional muscles that shortcuts would never touch. It forces you to sit with uncertainty long enough to build tolerance for it. Without this tolerance, clarity becomes dangerous. Certainty becomes addictive. Control becomes the only way you feel safe. Delay interrupts this pattern before it hardens into personality. Think about how often frustration rises not because nothing is happening, but because something is happening internally that you cannot yet name. Delay brings you face to face with yourself without distractions. When external movement stops, internal noise becomes louder. Old fears surface, old beliefs reveal themselves, unhealed parts ask for attention. This is not regression, this is exposure. Life is showing you what would sabotage you if things moved faster. Many people try to escape delay by forcing action. They rush decisions. They lower standards. They chase anything that feels like movement. But movement without alignment creates damage that takes years to undo. Delay teaches discernment. It teaches you to feel the difference between true readiness and emotional restlessness. One feels grounded, the other feels urgent. Life listens to this difference even when you don't. There is also an identity component most people miss. When progress is delayed, the version of you that was built around reaching the next milestone begins to weaken. Your sense of worth, direction, and meaning may have been attached to outcomes, roles, or timelines. Delay removes these reference points. It asks a difficult question without words. Who are you when nothing is moving? Who are you without proof? Who are you when effort does not immediately turn into reward? This is where premature identity collapse would happen if life did not intervene. If your sense of self depends entirely on progress, delay will feel unbearable. But that discomfort is the signal. It is showing you that your identity is too fragile to be expanded yet. Life delays not to shame you, but to deepen you. It invites you to root your sense of self in something more stable than momentum. During delay, patience is not passive waiting. It is active restructuring. You are learning how to stay present without control. You are learning how to self-regulate without reassurance. You're learning how to remain engaged without attachment to outcome. These skills are invisible, but they are essential. Without them, any progress you gain would require constant maintenance through anxiety and force. Delay also protects relationships. When progress comes too fast, people often lose connection with others and with themselves. Pressure replaces presence. Performance replaces authenticity. Delay creates space to develop emotional availability, empathy, and humility. It softens edges that success would sharpen too quickly. It teaches you how to remain human while growing. Another hidden function of delay is filtering intention. When something takes longer, superficial motivations fall away. Ego gets bored. External validation loses its pull. What remains is what truly matters to you. Delay strips desire down to its core. If you continue walking without applause, without confirmation, without visible progress, it means the path is aligned with something deeper than image or expectation. Life also uses delay to build nervous system capacity. Sudden change overwhelms the system. Gradual preparation builds resilience. During delay, your body learns how to tolerate uncertainty without panic. Your mind learns how to stay flexible instead of rigid. Your emotions learn how to move without overwhelming you. This is not accidental. It is biological wisdom. Growth that the nervous system cannot hold becomes trauma, not transformation. There is a reason breakdowns often follow breakthroughs that came too fast. The system was not ready. Delay prevents this by stretching time. It gives integration a chance to happen alongside desire. Integration is the quiet work of aligning thoughts, emotions, and behavior so that when change arrives, it feels natural instead of threatening. Delay also changes how you relate to control. When nothing responds to force, control loses its power. This can feel terrifying at first, but slowly another orientation emerges. Trust replaces strategy. Presence replaces prediction. You begin to move with life instead of against it. This shift cannot be rushed. It only happens when control repeatedly fails without catastrophic consequences. Many people fear delay because they believe time is running out. But time in personal growth is not linear. Depth cannot be measured by speed. Some lessons take longer because they are foundational. They support everything that comes after. Skipping them does not save time. It creates instability that costs more later. Delay is also where self-compassion develops. When progress is slow, harsh self-judgment often appears. You call yourself lazy, broken, behind. But over time, this voice either softens or exhausts itself. You learn that cruelty does not create movement, gentleness does. Understanding does. This shift changes how you treat yourself permanently. Life withholds progress when the cost of moving forward is greater than the benefit. You may not see the cost yet, but life does. It sees what you would lose in yourself if things happened faster. It sees the version of you that would be sacrificed. Delay preserves that version until it can evolve instead of disappear. Eventually, something subtle changes. Delay no longer feels like opposition. It feels like preparation. You begin to sense growth happening below the surface. Your reactions change. Your patience deepens. Your identity stabilizes. You are no longer rushing to become someone. You are becoming someone by staying. This is the intelligence of delay. It is not about stopping your life. It is about preventing collapse. It is about making sure that when progress returns, you are wide enough to hold it, steady enough to enjoy it, and grounded enough to remain yourself inside it. And without realizing it yet, something else is happening. The long way is starting to shape you in ways a shortcut never could. Skills are forming that do not look impressive from the outside, but will become unshakable later. Strength is being built quietly, without drama, without applause. This is where the path continues, because delay does not only protect you, it prepares you for a different kind of growth, one that shortcuts would quietly destroy. Something has already changed by the time you reach this point. Delay no longer feels like an enemy. It feels like a signal, a pause with purpose. And once you accept that life sometimes slows you down to protect you, another question naturally follows. What is actually being built during all this time that seems unproductive on the surface? What grows when the straight line disappears and the detour begins? There is a quiet discomfort that comes with detours. Not the sharp pain of failure, but a dull tension that sits in the background of your days. You are still moving, but not in the direction you planned. You are still trying, but the results do not look impressive. And this is exactly where the long way begins to do its most important work. Shortcuts appeal to the part of you that wants relief. They promise efficiency, speed, and control. They make you feel smart for avoiding discomfort. But shortcuts have a hidden cost. They bypass the conditions required to develop strength. They deliver outcomes without building the internal structure needed to sustain them. And what arrives without strength rarely stays without damage. The long way, by contrast, is inefficient by design. It exposes you to friction. It forces repetition. It asks you to stay present in moments that offer no reward, and in doing so, it builds muscles that shortcuts quietly weaken. Emotionally, the long way teaches regulation. When progress is slow and unpredictable, your emotions have nowhere to discharge through achievement. You cannot rely on external wins to stabilize your mood. You have to learn how to sit with disappointment without collapsing, how to tolerate uncertainty without spiraling, how to experience frustration without turning it into self-hatred. This capacity cannot be learned through success alone. It is forged through sustained exposure to discomfort that does not destroy you. Shortcuts weaken this muscle because they train emotional dependence on outcome. When things go well quickly, your nervous system learns to associate safety with speed and validation. Any slowdown later feels threatening. Anxiety increases, control tightens. You become less resilient precisely because things once worked easily. The long way prevents this fragility. It teaches you that emotional stability does not require constant confirmation. Spiritually, the detour changes your relationship with meaning. When life does not reward effort immediately, you are forced to ask why you are walking at all. Motivation based on recognition fades. Identity based on comparison erodes. What remains is a quieter reason for continuing. This is where purpose shifts from performance to alignment. You stop asking how this looks and start asking whether this feels true. Shortcuts often keep purpose shallow. They reward surface-level goals and reinforce external definitions of success. But the long way removes these reference points. It strips meaning down to what you are willing to commit to, even when no one is watching. This deepens your connection to values rather than outcomes. Over time, this creates a sense of inner direction that does not depend on circumstances. Psychologically, the long way strengthens self-trust. When plans fail repeatedly and yet you continue to adapt, something important happens. You stop trusting specific outcomes and start trusting your ability to respond. You learn that uncertainty does not equal danger. You learn that confusion does not mean incompetence. You learn that you can survive not knowing. This confidence is quiet but powerful. It does not announce itself. It stabilizes you from within. Shortcuts undermine this process. When things work too easily, you trust the system more than yourself. You trust formulas, strategies, timing. When those fail, panic sets in. The long way removes the illusion that certainty comes from control. It replaces it with the understanding that safety comes from adaptability. Detours also build humility. When progress is indirect, you are constantly reminded of your limits. Not in a humiliating way, but in a grounding one. You learn that effort does not guarantee outcome, that timing matters, that other forces are at play. This humility softens rigidity. It makes you more open, more teachable, more connected to others. Shortcuts inflate the ego. They create the impression that success is a personal achievement rather than a convergence of factors. This makes failure later feel like an identity threat. The long way avoids this trap. It keeps you realistic about your role in your own life. You participate fully, but you do not confuse participation with control. There is also a relational muscle built on detours. When life moves slowly, relationships are not overshadowed by urgency. You have time to listen, to notice patterns, to repair rather than replace. You learn patience with others because you are learning patience with yourself. This creates depth in connection that speed cannot produce. Shortcuts often damage relationships by prioritizing outcome over presence. People become obstacles or tools rather than companions. Detours rehumanize the journey. They remind you that growth happens alongside others, not above them. The long way also builds tolerance for boredom and repetition. This may sound unimportant, but it is essential. Many meaningful things require sustained attention over time. Craft, intimacy, wisdom, and character all develop through repetition that is not exciting. Detours train you to stay engaged without novelty. This ability is rare and powerful. Shortcuts destroy this capacity. They train constant stimulation. When novelty fades, interest disappears, commitment weakens. The long way builds endurance for the ordinary. It teaches you how to show up even when nothing feels new. There is a deeper layer here that is easy to miss. Detours reshape how you experience time. When progress is not linear, you stop measuring life solely by milestones. You begin to notice texture, small shifts, subtle growth, internal movement. Time becomes qualitative rather than competitive. This reduces the constant sense of falling behind. Shortcuts reinforce linear thinking. Faster becomes better, earlier becomes superior. Comparison intensifies. The long way breaks this pattern. It shows you that development unfolds in phases, not races. That some things ripen slowly because they are complex. Detours also expose false identities. When the role you are chasing remains out of reach, you are forced to confront who you are without it. This can feel destabilizing, but it is clarifying. You discover which parts of your self-image were borrowed and which are real. This refinement makes future growth more authentic. Shortcuts preserve false identities by rewarding them before they are tested. Detours test first, reward later. This sequence matters. It ensures that what grows is real. Emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, the long way is doing work you cannot see yet. It is increasing your capacity to hold complexity, to live with nuance, to respond rather than react. These capacities do not announce themselves. They become visible only when pressure arrives and you do not break. Eventually, you begin to notice something unexpected. The detour no longer feels like a delay. It feels like training. Situations that once overwhelmed you now feel manageable. Uncertainty that once triggered fear now triggers curiosity. You are not stronger because life got easier. You are stronger because you stayed present while it was hard. This is why shortcuts fail you later. They give you the destination without the endurance, the role without the regulation, the outcome without the orientation. And when life inevitably shifts, you are left unprepared. The long way does the opposite. It prepares you for change by making change familiar. It teaches you how to stay grounded while adapting. It builds a nervous system that can hold joy without panic and disappointment without collapse. There is also a quiet freedom that emerges from detours. When you stop expecting life to move quickly, you stop negotiating with it. You stop trying to outsmart it. You begin to cooperate instead. This cooperation reduces internal friction. Energy once spent resisting is freed for presence. Shortcuts keep you in negotiation mode, always adjusting, always calculating, always pushing. The long way ends this cycle. It replaces it with a steadier rhythm, one that does not need constant justification. Over time, the detour reshapes your relationship with effort. You no longer expect effort to guarantee results. You value effort for what it builds in you. This makes work less exhausting. You are no longer fighting reality, you are engaging with it, and slowly, without a dramatic moment, you realize that the muscles built on this path are permanent. They do not disappear when circumstances change. They do not depend on conditions. They are part of how you move through life now. This is why the long way matters. Not because it is noble, not because it is romantic, but because it builds capacities shortcuts quietly destroy. Capacities you will need not just to reach something, but to live inside it without losing yourself. And the path continues. Because once these muscles exist, life begins to ask something deeper. It invites you to trust outcomes you would never have chosen. By now the path has changed you. The detour has strengthened muscles you didn't know you were building. You no longer panic at slowness the way you once did. You can stay present without needing constant reassurance. And yet, another challenge quietly appears. Even with all this growth, life still delivers outcomes you did not ask for. Not delays this time, not detours, but results that feel wrong, unfair, or completely misaligned with what you hoped for. This is where trust is tested at a deeper level. Not trust in the process, but trust in where the process is leading you. There is a particular kind of disappointment that cuts deeper than failure. It happens when you do everything you thought was right. You stay patient, you grow, you endure, and life still gives you something different than what you wanted. Not worse in an obvious way, just different enough to hurt. This is where many people break their relationship with life. They don't lose hope loudly. They quietly withdraw. They comply on the outside but resist on the inside, and resistance, when it becomes chronic, slowly drains meaning from everything. Trusting outcomes you would never choose does not mean pretending you like them. It does not mean forcing gratitude or denying pain. It means learning how to stay aligned with your deeper direction, even when surface preferences are not met. There is a difference between preference and purpose, and most suffering comes from confusing the two. Preference is about form. Purpose is about direction. Preference says this must happen this way, at this time, with this result. Purpose says I am here to grow, to contribute, to become more whole, even if the shape of that growth surprises me. When preference leads, trust collapses the moment reality disagrees. When purpose leads, trust adapts. Many people believe surrender means giving up. In reality, surrender is refinement. It is letting go of the illusion that you know exactly how your life should unfold, while staying deeply committed to what matters beneath the surface. You stop insisting on specific outcomes, but you do not abandon your values, your effort, or your integrity. This distinction changes everything. Life often gives outcomes you would never choose because those outcomes access parts of you your preferred path would never touch. Comfort reinforces identity. Disruption reshapes it. When something does not go as planned, the mind immediately labels it as wrong. But the mind evaluates based on familiarity, not wisdom. What feels wrong is often just unfamiliar. What feels disappointing is often just unintegrated. Trusting an unwanted outcome means staying present long enough to understand what it is actually doing to you, not what it looks like, but what it builds. Some outcomes strip away false confidence, others force humility, some teach patience, others teach courage, some teach boundaries, others teach compassion. You do not get to choose the lesson, but you do get to choose whether you cooperate with it or fight it. Fighting unwanted outcomes keeps you stuck in comparison with an imaginary life that does not exist. You replay what should have happened. You measure everything against a version of reality that was never guaranteed. This creates a constant sense of loss, even when nothing tangible is missing. Trust redirects your attention away from what could have been and back to what is unfolding now. There is also grief involved in surrendering preference. You grieve the life you thought you would have by now. You grieve timelines. You grieve identities that made sense to you. Avoiding this grief keeps you attached to expectations that no longer serve you. Allowing it clears space for a more honest relationship with your life. Trusting outcomes you did not choose requires emotional maturity. It means holding disappointment without letting it turn into bitterness. Bitterness is the refusal to integrate experience. It freezes growth. Trust keeps experience moving through you. It allows pain to inform rather than define you. This kind of trust also changes how you interpret meaning. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin to ask, "What is being asked of me now?" This question shifts you from victimhood to participation. You are no longer trying to escape the moment. You are engaging with it. There is a subtle freedom that comes with this shift. When you stop demanding that life meet your preferences, you stop living in constant negotiation. You are no longer waiting to approve of reality before you show up. You meet life where it is, not where you wish it were. This does not make you passive, it makes you resilient. Trusting unexpected outcomes also builds self-respect. You learn that you can remain aligned even when disappointed, that you do not abandon yourself when things do not go your way. This creates an internal stability that no external success can provide. You become someone who can be trusted by yourself. Many people fear that surrendering preference will lead to a small life. They believe that if they stop pushing for what they want, they will settle. But surrendering preference is not about shrinking your life. It is about allowing it to expand beyond your limited imagination. Some of the most meaningful paths are invisible from where you start. They require a different doorway. Life often closes doors not to punish you, but to redirect you toward rooms you did not know existed. Trusting this does not mean you stop trying. It means you try without clinging. You act without attachment. You remain engaged without forcing meaning prematurely. This kind of trust also softens your relationship with control. Control thrives on certainty. Trust thrives on openness. When you accept that you cannot predict outcomes, you stop exhausting yourself trying to manage everything. Energy returns, creativity returns, presence returns. There is also a spiritual dimension here, even if you do not use spiritual language. Trusting life beyond preference requires faith in something larger than your current perspective. Not blind faith, but experiential faith. Faith built through surviving moments you thought would break you and discovering they didn't. Faith built through loss that reshaped you rather than destroyed you. Over time, you begin to notice that outcomes you once resented contributed to capacities you now rely on. You see how certain disappointments redirected you toward people, skills, or insights that changed everything. This does not erase the pain you felt, but it reframes it. Meaning appears in hindsight, not in advance. Trust also deepens your compassion for others. When you accept that life unfolds differently for everyone, you stop judging paths that do not match your own. You understand that unseen forces are always at work. This makes you gentler, less rigid, more human. Learning to trust outcomes you would never choose does not mean you stop setting intentions. It means you hold them lightly. You remain flexible. You allow life to collaborate with you rather than obey you. This collaboration feels less dramatic, but it is more sustainable. Eventually, something subtle shifts. You stop bracing against disappointment. You stop interpreting divergence as failure. You develop confidence in your ability to find meaning wherever you land. This does not make you indifferent. It makes you grounded. Purpose remains, but it is no longer attached to specific forms. It becomes a direction rather than a destination. You know what you stand for, even if you do not know exactly where you are going. This steadiness allows you to move forward without anxiety, and this trust is not passive acceptance. It is active alignment. You continue to choose integrity. You continue to show up. You continue to respond thoughtfully. You simply stop demanding that life match a script written by fear or impatience. There is peace in this, not the kind that comes from getting what you want, but the kind that comes from knowing you can work with whatever comes. This peace does not make life predictable. It makes you adaptable. As this understanding settles, you begin to realize something important. Trusting life does not mean everything works out the way you hoped. It means you stop needing it to. You trust yourself to meet life as it is, and that trust becomes the foundation for everything that follows. Because once preference loosens its grip, another truth begins to surface. Arriving too early carries a cost most people never see until it is too late. There is a quiet moment after surrendering preference when something unsettling becomes clear. Trusting life does not always lead you gently forward. Sometimes it brings you face to face with a truth that feels almost uncomfortable to admit. Not all success is a blessing. Not all arrival is a victory. Some doors open before you are ready to walk through them. And when that happens, the damage is subtle, slow, and often invisible to everyone, except the one living inside it. Early success looks like proof. Proof that you were right. Proof that your effort mattered. Proof that life finally agreed with you. But beneath that proof, something else is often missing. Stability, capacity, integration. When success comes before readiness, it asks parts of you to perform roles they have not yet grown into, and instead of expanding you, it fractures you. Readiness is not about skill alone. You can be talented and still unprepared. You can be intelligent and still fragile. You can be driven and still unsafe inside yourself. Readiness is about internal coherence. It is about having a nervous system that can handle pressure without collapsing, relationships without controlling, meaning without attachment, and responsibility without losing your sense of self. When success arrives too early, fulfillment is usually the first thing to erode. On the surface, everything looks right: the position, the recognition, the progress. But internally, there is a strange emptiness. You reach something you work toward, and instead of relief, you feel pressure. Instead of satisfaction, you feel fear. The question shifts from how do I get there to how do I keep this without losing everything else. This happens because fulfillment is not created by achievement alone. It is created by alignment between who you are and what you are holding. When the outer life expands faster than the inner life, fulfillment cannot keep up. There is no space for it to land. Success becomes something you manage rather than enjoy. Relationships also suffer quietly when arrival comes too soon. Early success often demands prioritization before boundaries are developed. Work replaces presence. Performance replaces honesty. Availability disappears. You begin to relate to others through roles rather than connection. Even love can start to feel conditional, tied to who you are becoming rather than who you are. There is also an imbalance that forms. People around you may admire your success but feel unable to reach you. You may feel misunderstood or isolated, unable to share the weight you carry because doing so feels like weakness. This distance grows slowly. You are surrounded by people yet internally alone. The very thing that was supposed to bring connection begins to separate you. Meaning is another casualty of early arrival. When success comes before you understand why you want it, it becomes hollow quickly. You chase the next milestone, not because it excites you, but because stopping feels dangerous. Motion replaces purpose. Growth becomes compulsive. You are no longer moving towards something meaningful. You are running from the fear of stagnation. Early success also locks identity too soon. You become known for something before you have explored who you are beyond it. This creates rigidity. You feel pressure to maintain an image rather than evolve. Any desire to change direction feels like betrayal, not just of others, but of yourself. You are trapped by a version of you that was never meant to be permanent. When readiness is missing, success amplifies unresolved patterns. Control issues intensify. Validation seeking becomes constant. Fear of failure sharpens. Perfectionism tightens. Instead of resolving these patterns, success rewards them. It tells them they work. This reinforcement makes them harder to unlearn later. There is also a physiological cost. Sustained pressure without regulation leads to burnout. The body begins to carry stress as a baseline. Rest feels unsafe. Stillness feels unproductive. Joy feels indulgent. Over time, exhaustion becomes normalized. You tell yourself this is the price of having what you wanted, but the deepest cost is disconnection from self. When you arrive too early, you spend more time managing life than living it. You are always slightly ahead of yourself, performing at a level your inner world has not integrated. This creates a split. The outside moves fast, the inside lags behind, and instead of meeting, they drift further apart. Many people do not recognize this until something breaks. A relationship ends, health declines, motivation disappears. They call it burnout or a midlife crisis, but it is often delayed misalignment finally surfacing. The system can only compensate for so long. Life delays progress precisely to prevent this scenario. Delay allows identity to mature alongside opportunity. It allows meaning to deepen before responsibility increases. It allows relationships to stabilize before pressure intensifies. It allows joy to develop roots rather than being blown away by expectation. Arriving later often feels frustrating in the moment, but it protects fulfillment. When you are ready, success feels spacious. You can enjoy it without clinging. You can share it without losing yourself. You can rest without guilt. You can fail without collapse. These capacities are invisible but essential. Late arrival also preserves flexibility. You are less attached to a single outcome. You are more open to evolution. Success becomes a chapter, not a cage. You can adjust course without panic because your identity is not fused to a role. There is a humility that comes with being shaped slowly. You recognize the role of timing, support, and chance. This humility keeps you grounded. It makes you more generous, more present, more human. Early success often lacks this grounding, creating distance between you and the world. The hidden cost of arriving too early is that it forces you to grow under pressure instead of preparation. Growth under pressure is reactive. Growth under preparation is integrative. One creates survival. The other creates wholeness. This does not mean early success is always damaging. It means early success without readiness is. Readiness cannot be rushed. It is built through delay, detours, disappointment, and trust. These experiences are not obstacles, they are safeguards. When life withholds arrival, it is not denying you. It is aligning you. It is making sure that when you step into what you are building, you do not have to abandon yourself to stay there. And this understanding changes how you view progress entirely. You stop asking, when will it happen, and start asking, who am I becoming, while it doesn't. You stop measuring life by speed and start measuring it by depth. Because fulfillment is not found at the moment of arrival. It is found in the ability to arrive without losing connection to yourself, to others, and to meaning. And as this settles, another realization quietly emerges. Confusion, which once felt like failure, may actually be a sign that something deeper is aligning beneath the surface. There is a strange relief that comes after realizing arrival too early can be dangerous. It reframes delay as protection, not rejection. But once that settles, a new discomfort often rises. The map you are following no longer works. The old rules feel unreliable. What once motivated you now feels empty. Direction blurs. Language fails. This is usually the moment people panic and label themselves lost. But this moment deserves a different interpretation, because confusion is not always a breakdown. Often, it is evidence that something deeper is being rearranged. Confusion feels unsettling because it removes familiar anchors. You no longer know what to want, what to chase, or what to trust. The mind hates this state. It prefers certainty, even if that certainty is limiting. So when confusion appears, the mind quickly concludes that something is wrong. But confusion often shows up not when you are failing, but when the old structure of understanding can no longer support who you are becoming. Think of confusion as a transition state. It emerges when the internal system you've been operating from has reached its limits. The beliefs, goals, identities, and coping strategies that once helped you move forward are no longer sufficient. Life does not always announce this upgrade gently. Instead, it creates a period where old signals stop making sense and new ones have not yet fully formed. This is why confusion often follows growth. After delay builds patience, detours build capacity, surrender loosens control, and timing restores alignment, confusion steps in to reorganize meaning. It is not random. It is functional. It is the space where outdated internal software is being replaced. When your internal operating system upgrades, clarity temporarily disappears. Old motivations lose power. Old identities feel hollow. You may still be capable, still functioning, still moving through life, but the sense of direction fades. This is not because you have no path. It is because the path is changing shape faster than your conscious mind can track. Confusion protects you from prematurely committing to the wrong direction. If clarity returned too quickly, you would simply reinstall the old system with new language. Confusion prevents this. It creates friction, it slows decision-making, it forces you to sit with uncertainty long enough for deeper alignment to occur. Many people mistake confusion for regression. They compare themselves to earlier versions who seemed more confident and decisive. But that confidence was built on assumptions that no longer apply. Returning to it would be a form of self-betrayal. Confusion is the cost of honesty. It appears when you stop lying to yourself about what no longer fits. There is also an emotional component. Confusion exposes emotional truths that clarity often covers. When you don't know what to do next, feelings surface without structure. Fear, grief, longing, resentment, relief, and hope can all coexist. This mix feels chaotic, but it is informative. It shows you what needs attention before direction can stabilize again. The mind wants to resolve confusion by forcing conclusions. It wants to label, decide, and move on. But forced clarity leads to misalignment. It locks you into choices that reflect fear rather than truth. Confusion asks for patience. It asks you to listen rather than decide. This listening is not passive. It is active awareness without immediate action. Confusion also resets your relationship with certainty. It teaches you that certainty is not always wisdom. Sometimes it is just familiarity. The absence of certainty creates space for insight that cannot emerge under pressure. Many breakthroughs occur not through thinking harder, but through allowing confusion to soften rigid frameworks. There is a psychological recalibration happening during confusion. Old reward systems stop working. External validation loses impact. Goals that once drove you no longer energize you. This can feel like loss of motivation, but it is actually a shift in values. What used to matter is being replaced by something more congruent with your evolving self. Confusion often arrives after you have outgrown external measures of success. When your inner life becomes more complex, simple metrics fail. You can no longer evaluate progress solely through speed, status, or achievement. This creates a temporary vacuum. You have not yet learned how to measure alignment. Confusion fills that gap until new internal markers develop. There is also a bodily dimension. Confusion affects energy levels, sleep patterns, and focus. The nervous system is adjusting. Old patterns of urgency and control are loosening. This can feel like fatigue or restlessness, but beneath it, regulation is happening. The system is learning how to operate without constant tension. People often try to escape confusion by distracting themselves or overloading their lives with activity. But distraction delays integration. Confusion needs space. It needs quiet. It needs room to reorganize internal priorities. Avoiding it prolongs it. Confusion also reveals attachment. The discomfort you feel is often tied to what you are afraid to let go of. An identity, a timeline, an image, a belief about who you should be by now. Confusion forces these attachments into awareness. It challenges you to release what no longer supports growth. This release is rarely dramatic. It happens gradually, through boredom, disinterest, and emotional distance. What once consumed you loses urgency. This can feel scary because it leaves a gap. But that gap is fertile. It is where new meaning forms. Confusion is also a test of trust. Not trust in outcome, but trust in process. Can you stay present without needing to know? Can you allow uncertainty without interpreting it as danger? Can you remain engaged without clarity? These questions are not answered intellectually, they are answered through experience. The internal upgrade happening during confusion requires time. Neural pathways are reorganizing. Emotional responses are recalibrating. Values are shifting. This is complex work. It cannot be rushed without causing distortion. Confusion slows you down so integration can keep pace with change. There is also creativity hidden in confusion. When old frameworks dissolve, new connections become possible. Ideas combine in unexpected ways. Insight emerges from unlikely places. This is why many creative breakthroughs come after periods of confusion. The mind becomes more flexible when it is no longer constrained by certainty. Confusion also deepens empathy. When you no longer feel certain about your own path, you become less judgmental of others. You recognize the unseen complexity behind choices. This softens your relationship with people and with life itself. Over time, confusion begins to change texture. It becomes less panicked and more curious. You stop asking what is wrong and start asking what is forming. This shift marks alignment. You are no longer fighting the process. You are participating in it. Eventually, clarity does return, but it is different from before. It is quieter, less urgent, less rigid. It does not demand immediate action. It offers direction without pressure. This clarity feels grounded rather than excited. It does not promise certainty. It offers coherence. And when this clarity arrives, you realize confusion was not an error. It was a recalibration. It was life updating your internal operating system so you could function at a higher level of complexity, integrity, and truth. Confusion stripped away outdated goals. It loosened false identities. It taught you how to stay present without answers. It prepared you to move forward with discernment rather than impulse. This is why confusion often appears when life is aligning you more deeply. It is the signal that something old has ended and something new is forming, even if you cannot yet name it. And as this understanding settles, another pattern becomes visible. The long way is not just shaping skills or clarity. It is quietly filtering who you can become. After confusion loosens its grip, something quieter but more demanding begins. It is no longer about not knowing. It is about no longer being able to carry certain parts of yourself forward. The long way does not just teach you, it edits you. It removes traits, habits, identities, and coping mechanisms that once helped you survive, but would sabotage you if they reached the destination. This process is subtle, often uncomfortable, and deeply necessary. The long way acts like a filter because not every version of you is built to last. Some versions were created for speed, not endurance. Some were shaped by fear, not truth. Some were motivated by approval, not alignment. These versions can move fast, impress others, and achieve quick wins. But they cannot survive depth. They cannot hold responsibility without control. They cannot hold intimacy without defense. They cannot hold meaning without attachment. Extended journeys expose this slowly. When things take longer than expected, surface-level traits stop working. Charm runs out. Willpower exhausts itself. Image maintenance becomes too heavy. What remains is what is real, and what is real either strengthens or dissolves. One of the first things the long way removes is urgency-based identity. This is the version of you that feels valuable only when progressing, producing, or proving something. On a long path, urgency burns out. You cannot sprint forever. Life does not respond faster just because you panic. Eventually, urgency collapses under its own weight. This forces you to find a sense of worth that is not tied to speed. Another version that cannot survive the destination is the approval-seeking self. When progress is slow and recognition is scarce, external validation dries up. There are no quick wins to show, no applause to rely on. If your motivation depends on being seen, the long way will feel unbearable. Over time, this dependence weakens. You stop performing for an audience that is no longer there. You begin to act from internal alignment instead. The long way also filters out control-based strength. Control can be effective in short bursts. It creates the illusion of competence. But over long timelines, control becomes rigid. Life changes. Conditions shift. Control breaks. The long way exposes how fragile control really is. It replaces it with adaptability. You learn how to respond instead of dominate. This makes you stronger in a way that lasts. Another identity that dissolves is the comparison-driven self. On extended journeys, comparison loses relevance. Everyone's timeline looks different. Metrics stop matching. If you continue to compare, you suffer constantly. Eventually, comparison becomes exhausting. You stop measuring yourself against others because it provides no useful information. This frees enormous mental energy. You begin to track your own growth instead. The long way also removes emotional avoidance. When discomfort lasts longer than expected, avoidance fails. You cannot distract forever. Feelings you postponed demand attention. This is not punishment. It is integration. The destination requires emotional honesty. Versions of you that avoid pain cannot function there. They would sabotage intimacy, leadership, and self-respect. Extended journeys also dismantle fantasy-based motivation. Fantasies about arrival, recognition, or transformation keep people moving early on, but fantasies cannot sustain long-term effort. When reality does not match imagination, disappointment sets in. Over time, fantasy dissolves. What remains is commitment. Commitment is quieter, less dramatic, more reliable. The long way filters ambition as well. Not ambition itself, but the form it takes. Ambition rooted in fear becomes exhausting. Ambition rooted in ego becomes brittle. Ambition rooted in alignment survives. Extended journeys reveal which kind you are operating from. The wrong kind burns out. The right kind deepens. There is also a moral dimension to this filtering. The long way exposes ethical shortcuts. When progress is slow, temptation increases. You are offered easier paths, compromises, rationalizations. Each choice shapes character. Over time, the long way rewards integrity not with speed, but with coherence. You become someone who trusts yourself because you know what you are willing to sacrifice and what you are not. The destination requires this coherence. Without it, success creates inner conflict. Power amplifies weakness. Visibility magnifies insecurity. Responsibility exposes immaturity. The long way removes these risks by refining character before arrival. Another version that cannot survive the destination is the self that needs certainty. Long paths rarely offer guarantees. If you need constant reassurance, you will struggle. Over time, the need for certainty weakens. You develop comfort with ambiguity. This flexibility is essential at higher levels of complexity. Life becomes less predictable as it expands. The long way prepares you for that reality. The long way also filters relationships. Some connections fade because they were built on shared struggle, not shared values. Others strengthen because they can grow alongside you. This is not loss, it is alignment. The destination requires relationships that can handle depth, honesty, and change. As these versions fall away, there can be grief. You mourn who you thought you were. You mourn identities that once felt safe. This grief is part of the filtering. It prevents nostalgia from pulling you backward. It allows space for something truer to form. What remains after enough time is simpler, but stronger. You become less reactive, less performative, less desperate. You are not harder. You are steadier. This steadiness is not exciting, but it is powerful. It allows you to move through life without constant internal conflict. The long way also filters motivation. You stop doing things to escape discomfort. You start doing things because they are aligned. This changes how effort feels. Work becomes less draining. Persistence becomes natural. You no longer need to force yourself constantly. There is also a shift in how you experience setbacks. Earlier versions of you might have interpreted them as personal failure. Later versions see them as information. This perspective allows growth without shame. Shame cannot survive the destination. It poisons fulfillment. Extended journeys also remove the need to impress. Impressing is fragile. It requires performance. The destination values presence, not performance. Over time, the need to impress fades. You are comfortable being ordinary while becoming exceptional in quieter ways. The long way filters entitlement as well. When things take time, entitlement dissolves. You stop expecting life to reward effort immediately. This makes gratitude possible, gratitude grounded in realism, not fantasy. Eventually, you notice that you are no longer trying to become someone. You are simply being shaped. This reduces internal pressure. Growth feels less like construction and more like emergence. The destination does not need the version of you that rushed, controlled, compared, avoided, or performed. It needs the version that can hold complexity, responsibility, intimacy, and meaning without collapsing. The long way ensures that only this version arrives. This filtering is not harsh, it is precise. It removes what cannot last, so that what can last has space to grow. It is not about perfection, it is about integrity. And once this filtering is far enough along, another illusion begins to dissolve. The idea that you are falling behind starts to lose its grip. Once the long way has filtered what cannot last, something else quietly loses its power. The urgency to catch up begins to fade. The voice that kept asking, "Where should I be by now?" grows weaker, and in its place, a deeper question forms. What if you were never behind at all? What if the pressure you've been carrying came from believing in a timeline that was never real? The idea of falling behind feels heavy because it suggests failure without a clear mistake. You didn't stop trying. You didn't give up. Yet somehow you feel late. This feeling does not come from life itself. It comes from comparison, and comparison is one of the most convincing illusions in human experience. Time in personal evolution does not move in straight lines. It moves in layers, in cycles, in expansions and contractions. Some phases are external and visible, others are internal and invisible. When you measure internal phases with external clocks, confusion and shame appear. You judge depth by speed. You judge readiness by age. You judge alignment by milestones. None of these measures are accurate. The myth of falling behind is built on the assumption that everyone is moving toward the same destination at the same pace. But personal evolution does not follow shared timelines. Two people can start in the same place and need completely different journeys to become whole. One may need speed, another may need stillness. One may need challenge, another may need repair. Neither is ahead or behind. They are simply responding to different needs. Comparison fractures trust in life because it shifts authority outward. You stop listening to your own process and start evaluating it through other people's outcomes. Their visibility becomes your standard. Their speed becomes your pressure. Their success becomes your deficiency. This creates constant internal conflict. Even when your life is working, it feels wrong because it doesn't match someone else's. Comparison also distorts perception. You see the highlights of others and compare them to the unfinished parts of yourself. You compare their results to your process. This is not a fair comparison, but it feels real because the mind craves reference points. Over time, this habit erodes confidence. You begin to doubt choices that are actually aligned. The long way exposes the flaw in linear thinking. Progress does not always look like forward motion. Sometimes it looks like consolidation. Sometimes it looks like rest. Sometimes it looks like confusion. These phases are not delays, they are essential transitions. Without them, growth becomes shallow and unstable. Time in personal evolution is also non-linear because insight does not arrive evenly. You can grow more in one difficult year than in 5 comfortable ones. You can integrate lessons later that you encountered earlier but were not ready to understand. Growth is not additive, it is integrative. It rearranges what already exists rather than constantly adding new layers. Falling behind assumes there is a fixed schedule for becoming yourself, but identity is not a checklist. You do not unlock wisdom, stability, or purpose by a certain age simply because others appear to have done so. Many people who seem ahead are still operating on borrowed certainty. Many who seem slow are building foundations that will outlast surface success. Comparison also disconnects you from the present moment. When you believe you are behind, the present becomes a problem to solve rather than a place to inhabit. You rush experiences, you skip integration, you force decisions. This creates more misalignment, not less. Trust in life weakens because you are constantly arguing with timing. There is also a cultural element here. Modern life glorifies acceleration, faster careers, faster healing, faster clarity. But inner development does not respond to pressure. It responds to safety, attention, and time. When you internalize the belief that faster is better, you turn your inner life into a race it cannot win. The myth of falling behind also ignores recovery. Many people are not slow. They are healing. Healing does not produce visible milestones. It produces capacity. Without healing, speed is unsustainable. Comparing yourself during recovery to someone in expansion is not just unfair, it is harmful. Comparison fractures trust because it implies that life is inconsistent, that it favors others, that it withholds from you. But life is not distributing identical packages. It is responding to individual conditions. Trust returns when you stop interpreting difference as deficiency. There is also a hidden arrogance in comparison. It assumes you know what someone else's life requires. It assumes their path would work for you. It assumes outcomes are interchangeable. They are not. What nourishes one person may overwhelm another. What strengthens one may break another. The long way teaches patience with your own unfolding. You begin to see that certain things could not have happened earlier without damaging you. Certain responsibilities would have crushed you. Certain relationships would have trapped you. Certain clarity would have narrowed you. Timing protected you, even when it frustrated you. As comparison loses its grip, a new relationship with time emerges. You stop asking how long this is taking and start noticing what is changing. You track subtle shifts, increased tolerance, deeper calm, better discernment. These are not things you can rush. They arrive when conditions are right. The myth of falling behind also collapses when you realize that many people will need to unlearn what they rushed into. Early achievement often requires later repair. What looks like advancement can become detour. What looks like delay can become alignment. Trust in life grows when you accept that your timeline is not a mistake. It is a response. A response to your history, your nervous system, your values, and your potential. Life is not trying to make you late. It is trying to make you whole. Comparison also weakens self-trust. When you constantly measure yourself against others, you stop trusting your own signals. You override intuition. You dismiss discomfort. You chase goals that do not fit. Over time, this creates confusion and resentment. Trust returns when you stop outsourcing your sense of progress. The long way reframes success. It is no longer about arriving first. It is about arriving intact, with relationships preserved, with meaning intact, with self-respect undamaged. These outcomes require timing that cannot be standardized. There is relief in letting go of the race, not resignation, but relief. You reclaim energy previously spent on self-judgment. You become more present, more curious, less defensive. Life feels less like a test and more like a dialogue. The myth of falling behind thrives in silence. It weakens when examined. When you question it, you begin to see how arbitrary it is, how it changes depending on who you compare yourself to, how it never fully resolves because someone will always be ahead in some way. Trusting life means trusting that your pace is not random, that your delays are not errors, that your timing is part of the design, not a deviation from it. This trust does not make you passive, it makes you patient. As comparison fades, gratitude becomes possible, not forced gratitude but realistic appreciation for what your path has given you. Depth, resilience, discernment. These are not flashy, but they are essential. Eventually, you stop thinking in terms of ahead and behind. You think in terms of alignment and readiness. You ask not where am I compared to others, but how am I relating to my own life right now? And this shift prepares you for the next lesson. Because once comparison loosens, life introduces a deeper test of trust. It begins to withhold explanations altogether. Once comparison loosens its grip, life becomes quieter in a different way. You are no longer measuring yourself against others, no longer chasing a borrowed clock. But just when you expect this relief to bring answers, something unexpected happens. Life stops explaining itself. Events unfold without commentary. Decisions lose their obvious reasons. Paths open and close without justification. And a new tension appears, not from pressure, but from silence. There is a specific discomfort that comes when nothing is clearly wrong, yet nothing is clearly explained. You are not failing, you are not lost, but you also cannot point to a reason for what is happening. This is one of the most difficult stages of trust, because the mind wants logic before commitment, it wants clarity before movement, and life at this stage refuses to provide it. Life withholds explanation, not because it is cruel, but because explanation can become a dependency. When you need reasons in order to move forward, you are not trusting life. You are negotiating with it. You are saying, "Show me first, then I will walk." But trust works in the opposite direction. You walk first, and understanding follows later. Many people confuse explanation with safety. They believe that if they understand why something is happening, they will feel calm. But often, explanation only creates temporary relief. It satisfies the mind, but does not regulate the nervous system. True safety comes from learning that you can move through uncertainty without collapsing. Life teaches this by removing the mental handrails. When explanations disappear, the mind panics. It fills the silence with stories. It assumes rejection, punishment, or failure. But these stories are habits, not truths. They are attempts to regain control. Life allows this confusion to surface so it can be seen, questioned, and eventually released. Withholding explanation forces you to rely on something deeper than logic. It asks you to trust your internal sense of alignment rather than external confirmation. This is uncomfortable because alignment is subtle. It does not shout. It does not prove itself. It feels like a quiet yes beneath uncertainty. Learning to follow that signal is a skill, one that cannot develop if explanations are always available. There is also a timing element. Some explanations would limit you if given too early. If you understood exactly why something was happening, you might resist it. You might try to optimize it. You might try to control it. Withholding explanation protects the process from interference. Life also withholds explanation to prevent attachment to meaning too soon. Early interpretations are often incomplete. They reflect fear, hope, or ego more than truth. By delaying explanation, life allows experience to fully unfold before meaning is assigned. This leads to deeper understanding later. There is a psychological restructuring happening here. You are learning to separate action from certainty. You are learning to choose without guarantees. This builds confidence that is not dependent on prediction. You stop asking, "Will this work?" and start asking, "Is this aligned?" That shift changes everything. When explanation is absent, presence becomes essential. You cannot live in future outcomes because they are unclear. You cannot live in past logic because it no longer applies. You are pulled into the present moment. This presence is not passive. It is alert, attentive, and responsive. It sharpens intuition. Many people try to force explanation by overthinking. They analyze every detail, searching for patterns. This creates mental exhaustion. Life does not reward this effort with clarity. It waits. It waits until you stop demanding answers and start engaging with what is in front of you. Clarity is often withheld because it is not yet useful, Knowing where something leads before you are ready can distort how you walk. It can create expectation, pressure, or complacency. Trust requires neutrality. Withholding explanation keeps you open. There is also humility being taught here. Explanation feeds the illusion that you can fully understand life from your current position. Withholding explanation reminds you of perspective limits. It teaches respect for complexity. It teaches patience with the unknown. Over time, something shifts. The absence of explanation becomes less threatening. You realize that you have been here before and survived. You begin to recognize patterns in yourself rather than in events. You notice how you respond to uncertainty. You see growth happening in real time. Trust deepens when you realize that clarity always arrives eventually, but never on demand. It arrives after integration, not before action. After experience, not before choice. This timing is consistent. Life has always worked this way. You simply notice it now. Withholding explanation also protects meaning. When clarity arrives later, it carries weight. It is earned through experience. It resonates emotionally, not just intellectually. It settles into the body. It changes behavior naturally. There is also freedom here. When you stop needing explanation, you stop needing permission. You are no longer waiting for life to justify itself before you engage. You participate fully without understanding everything. This participation builds resilience. Many people believe trust means believing everything will work out. That is not what is being taught. Trust means believing that whatever unfolds can be worked with, that you will not be abandoned by your own capacity to respond. Life tests trust by removing the mental scaffolding you leaned on. It asks, can you stay open without answers? Can you stay kind without reassurance? Can you stay engaged without explanation? Each yes strengthens trust. This stage also reveals where trust is still conditional, where you say you trust life, but only if it explains itself. Seeing this is not failure, it is awareness. Awareness is the first step toward deeper trust. Eventually, clarity begins to return, but it arrives quietly, not as a dramatic revelation, but as coherence. Things make sense in hindsight. Connections form. You see how one event led to another, how confusion protected you, how silence guided you. This clarity does not make you feel clever. It makes you feel grounded. You no longer need to convince yourself that life is meaningful. You have lived that meaning into existence. And this changes how you approach future uncertainty. You stop demanding explanations at the beginning. You allow life to unfold. You trust that understanding will come when it can actually serve you. This is why clarity is a reward for trust, not a prerequisite. It comes after you have proven that you can walk without it. It comes after you have stayed present without knowing. It comes after you have chosen alignment over reassurance. As this lesson settles, something else becomes visible. Resistance, which once felt like strength, begins to look more like loyalty to an old self. When explanations fade and trust deepens, resistance does not disappear. It changes shape. It becomes quieter, more reasonable, more convincing. It no longer feels like fear. It feels like loyalty. Loyalty to plans you once made. Loyalty to dreams that carried you through hard years. Loyalty to an identity that once saved you. And this is where the next layer of growth begins, because not all resistance is rebellion. Some resistance is devotion to a past that no longer fits. There is a particular pain in realizing that what you are holding on to is not wrong, just outdated. Old dreams often formed in moments of survival. They gave you direction when you needed hope. They gave you structure when you needed escape. They gave you meaning when you needed purpose. Letting go of them can feel like betrayal, not of a goal, but of the version of you who needed that goal to survive. Resistance often appears when life starts pulling you towards something unfamiliar. The new direction feels vague. The old dream feels clear. Even if it no longer excites you, it feels safer because it is known. Resistance says stay. Stay with what you promised yourself. Stay with what makes sense. Stay with what people expect. But beneath that voice is fear, not of failure, but of identity loss. Misdirected loyalty keeps you tied to versions of yourself that were built for a different chapter. You confuse consistency with integrity. You believe changing direction means you were wrong before, but growth does not invalidate earlier truth. It updates it. What was once aligned can become restrictive if held too tightly. Old dreams often carry emotional contracts. You may have sacrificed for them. You may have endured pain for them. Letting go can feel like saying that sacrifice was wasted, but sacrifice is not wasted just because the outcome changes. The strength, insight, and resilience built along the way remain. They simply get redirected. Resistance also protects familiarity. Even when something no longer fits, familiarity feels grounding. The nervous system prefers known discomfort over unknown possibility. This is why resistance often increases right before a shift. Not because the shift is wrong, but because it threatens the identity built around the old dream. There is also social loyalty involved. People around you may still see you through the lens of who you were becoming. Changing direction risks disappointing them. Resistance convinces you that staying is noble, that leaving is selfish. But living a life that no longer fits to preserve other people's expectations creates quiet resentment. Over time, this resentment erodes authenticity. Resistance is not always loud. Sometimes it shows up as overthinking, sometimes as procrastination, sometimes as sudden doubt about things that once felt clear. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs that an internal negotiation is happening. Part of you is ready to move on. Another part is trying to protect continuity. Old dreams can become cages when they outlive their purpose. They demand maintenance. They demand justification. You keep investing energy not because they fulfill you, but because stopping feels too costly. This is how loyalty becomes misdirected. You protect the dream at the expense of the person you are becoming. Life does not punish this resistance immediately. It allows it. It waits. Over time, the cost of staying becomes clearer. Motivation fades. Energy drops. Joy becomes conditional. These are signals, not failures. They are invitations to reassess alignment. Trusting life at this stage means trusting that growth may require release. Not dramatic release, not impulsive abandonment, but honest acknowledgement. You admit that something once meaningful no longer fits. You allow grief without turning it into obligation. There is a difference between honoring the past and being trapped by it. Honoring means appreciating what it gave you while allowing evolution. Being trapped means mistaking history for destiny. Resistance keeps you trapped. Trust sets you free. This process also refines discernment. You learn to distinguish between resistance that protects integrity and resistance that protects fear. Integrity-based resistance feels grounded. It aligns with values. Fear-based resistance feels tight. It relies on stories about loss, judgment, or wasted time. Clinging to old dreams often betrays who you are becoming because it prioritizes familiarity over truth. Growth asks for honesty, not consistency. It asks you to listen to what energizes you now, not what once did. There is also a humility in releasing outdated dreams. You accept that you did not know everything then, and you do not know everything now. You allow yourself to evolve without needing to justify every change. This humility creates flexibility. Resistance often dissolves when you realize that letting go does not erase your past. It integrates it. The skills, lessons, and character built remain. They simply find new expression. Trusting life here means trusting that your becoming is not random, that the pull towards something new is not betrayal, but alignment. That staying loyal to growth sometimes requires leaving behind goals that no longer serve you. As this loyalty realigns, you begin to feel lighter. Not because everything is clear, but because you are no longer fighting yourself. Energy returns, curiosity returns, life feels less forced. And once resistance softens, another shift occurs. Life begins to respond differently when you stop negotiating outcomes and start committing to alignment. When resistance softens and loyalty realigns, something subtle takes its place. It is not excitement, it is not certainty, it is a quiet shift in how you relate to life itself. You stop arguing with what is happening, you stop bargaining for different outcomes, and without announcing it, a different kind of relationship begins. One that does not rely on force, urgency, or explanation. This is where the quiet agreement forms. At first it feels almost unsettling. You are so used to negotiating with life that not doing so feels passive, even irresponsible. For a long time, effort meant pushing. Trust meant hoping things would turn out the way you wanted. But now, something changes. You still care. You still act. But you no longer demand that life meet your conditions in order for you to stay engaged. Negotiating outcomes usually sounds reasonable. You say things like, "I'll keep going if this works out. I'll trust if I see progress. I'll stay patient as long as there's a sign." These conditions feel practical, but they keep you in a transactional relationship with life. You are constantly assessing, adjusting, and bracing. This creates tension even when things are going well. When you stop negotiating outcomes, you are not giving up direction. You are changing posture. You move from control to cooperation, from conditional effort to consistent presence. This shift changes how life responds, not because life rewards obedience, but because you are no longer interfering with the process. Negotiation keeps your attention in the future. You are always checking whether things are turning out right. This prevents you from fully inhabiting the present. Life responds best when you are present, because presence allows you to notice signals you would otherwise miss. When you stop negotiating, your awareness sharpens. There is also an energetic component. Constant negotiation leaks energy. You spend mental effort calculating, worrying, predicting. When you stop doing this, that energy becomes available for action, creativity, and resilience. Life feels less heavy not because circumstances changed, but because internal resistance decreased. The quiet agreement is not spoken, it is felt. It sounds like this internally. I will show up fully without demanding certainty. I will act with integrity without requiring guarantees. I will stay aligned even when outcomes are unclear. This agreement changes the quality of your engagement. Life responds differently when you stop negotiating because your actions become cleaner. They are no longer driven by fear of loss or hunger for reward. They are guided by values, curiosity, and responsiveness. This makes your choices more accurate. You waste less time forcing what does not fit. Negotiation often blinds you to opportunities that do not match your expectations. When you insist on specific outcomes, you filter reality too narrowly. You overlook paths that feel wrong simply because they are unfamiliar. When negotiation ends, perception widens. You see options you would have dismissed before. There is also relief in no longer needing life to explain itself before you cooperate. You stop asking why this and start asking what now. This question is more useful. It keeps you engaged without trapping you in analysis. Life moves through action, not explanation. The quiet agreement also stabilizes emotion. When you are no longer emotionally invested in specific outcomes, disappointment loses its power. It still hurts, but it does not destabilize you. Success still feels good, but it does not inflate you. Your emotional state becomes less reactive and more steady. This steadiness changes relationships as well. You stop projecting expectations onto others. You stop needing them to behave a certain way to validate your path. This reduces conflict. You listen more. You respond rather than react. Life feels less adversarial. Stopping negotiation does not mean passivity, it means precision. You choose carefully. You commit fully. You let go quickly when something is not aligned. This combination creates momentum that feels natural rather than forced. The quiet agreement also builds trust in timing. You stop trying to accelerate growth. You respect phases. You allow things to ripen. This patience is not idle. It is attentive. You remain engaged without rushing. Life responds to this rhythm. There is also humility here. You accept that you do not have full visibility. You allow life to surprise you. This humility does not weaken you. It strengthens adaptability. You become more responsive to change because you are not attached to a script. Negotiation keeps you in a defensive posture. You are always protecting against disappointment. The quiet agreement allows vulnerability. You are open to outcomes without clinging to them. This openness creates connection, not just with others, but with life itself. Over time, you notice that things begin to unfold with less friction, not faster, but smoother. Obstacles still appear, but you do not personalize them. Delays still happen, but you do not interpret them as rejection. You work with what is present rather than resisting what is absent. Life responds to this by offering clearer signals, not dramatic signs, but subtle alignment. Conversations land at the right time. Opportunities appear without force. Decisions feel simpler. This is not magic. It is the result of reduced interference. When you stop negotiating outcomes, you also stop abandoning yourself when things do not go as planned. You remain intact. This self-trust is powerful. It allows you to stay flexible without losing direction. The quiet agreement teaches you that effort does not need to be aggressive. It can be steady, it can be patient, it can be responsive. This changes how sustainable your path becomes. There is also a moral clarity that emerges. When outcomes are no longer the primary measure, integrity becomes central. You care more about how you move through life than what you get from it. This creates coherence between values and behavior. Negotiation often leads to compromise of values in pursuit of results. The quiet agreement removes this temptation. You stop trading integrity for speed. This builds self-respect, which becomes a source of strength. As this agreement settles, you begin to feel less anxious about the future, not because you believe it will be easy, but because you trust your capacity to respond. This trust is grounded, not hopeful. Life responds differently because you are no longer trying to control it. You are participating in it. Participation creates feedback. Control creates resistance. The quiet agreement replaces resistance with responsiveness. Eventually, you realize that this agreement was always available. You simply had to stop negotiating to feel it. Life was never withholding. It was waiting for cooperation rather than control. And as this cooperation deepens, something important becomes clear. The long way does more than teach you patience or trust. It teaches you how to trust yourself without certainty. When the negotiation ends and cooperation begins, something stronger than hope starts to form. It is not confidence based on plans. It is not optimism tied to outcomes. It is a quieter realization that settles into the body before the mind catches up. You notice that even without answers, even without guarantees, you are still here, still functioning, still capable. This is where self-trust begins to solidify, not because life became predictable, but because you discovered you can stand inside unpredictability without falling apart. Self-trust does not come from certainty, it comes from survival. Not survival in the dramatic sense, but survival through long stretches of not knowing. Through unanswered questions, through delayed outcomes, through moments when clarity never arrived on schedule and you had to keep going anyway. Each time you stayed present without certainty, something internal strengthened. You did not just endure uncertainty, you learned how to live inside it. The long way creates self-trust because it removes the illusion that safety comes from control. For much of life, you are taught that planning equals security, that knowing what comes next keeps you safe, but prolonged uncertainty slowly dismantles this belief. You make plans that change, you prepare for outcomes that never arrive, you anticipate threats that never materialize, and yet you continue. Your nervous system learns something crucial. Uncertainty is uncomfortable, but it is not fatal. This lesson cannot be taught intellectually. It must be lived. The body must experience uncertainty and discover that it can regulate itself without constant reassurance. The mind must face unanswered questions and learn that it does not collapse when answers are missing. Over time, fear loses its authority. It still appears, but it no longer dictates behavior. Self-trust grows each time you make a decision without full information and survive the result. It grows when you adapt to change rather than resist it. It grows when you recover from disappointment and realize you are still intact. These experiences stack quietly. They do not announce themselves, but they create a foundation that does not depend on circumstances. The long way also teaches discernment. When certainty is unavailable, you learn to listen to subtler signals. Intuition sharpens. You become more attuned to your own reactions, energy, and values. You stop needing external permission to validate choices. This internal reference point becomes reliable because it is built through experience, not theory. Surviving prolonged uncertainty also rewires your relationship with fear. Fear stops being a signal to stop and becomes a signal to pay attention. You learn that fear often appears when something matters, not when something is wrong. This distinction is essential. Without it, fear controls direction. With it, fear becomes information. The long way strips away dependence on outcomes for self-worth. When outcomes are delayed or unpredictable, you cannot measure your value by success alone. You are forced to find worth in effort, integrity, and resilience. This shift is subtle but profound. You stop feeling like a failure when things take time. You stop feeling superior when things go well. Your sense of self stabilizes. Self-trust also develops through repeated recalibration. The long way rarely follows a straight line. You adjust goals, you revise expectations, you change strategies. Each adjustment teaches you that you are capable of learning and responding. You are not fragile, you are adaptable. This adaptability becomes a source of confidence. Another aspect of self-trust built on the long way is emotional reliability. You learn that emotions rise and fall without destroying you. Anxiety peaks and passes. Doubt appears and fades. Sadness moves through. You stop trying to eliminate these states. You allow them. This allowance reduces their intensity. Emotional stability emerges not from suppression, but from familiarity. The long way also reveals that certainty often creates rigidity. When you believe you know exactly how things should unfold, deviation feels threatening. When certainty disappears, flexibility becomes necessary. You learn to hold plans lightly. This flexibility protects you from shock. It makes change less destabilizing. Self-trust deepens when you stop expecting life to confirm your choices immediately. You learn to commit without applause, to persist without validation, to rest without guilt. These behaviors reinforce a sense of inner authority. You trust yourself because you are no longer constantly checking for approval. There is also a humility that strengthens self-trust. You accept that you will not always get it right. You allow for mistakes without turning them into identity judgments. This makes learning easier. You do not fear being wrong. You trust your ability to correct course. The long way teaches you that safety is not the absence of risk. It is the presence of capacity. Capacity to respond, capacity to adapt, capacity to recover. When you know you have these capacities, uncertainty loses its threat. Self-trust also changes how you approach decisions. You stop waiting for perfect clarity. You move when alignment is sufficient. You accept that some decisions can only be understood after they are made. This reduces paralysis. Action becomes possible without guarantees. As self-trust grows, your relationship with time shifts again. You are less rushed, less pressured. You trust that you will recognize what matters when it arrives. You do not need to force timing. This patience is not passive, it is confident. The long way also dissolves the fear of being wrong about your life. You realize that there is no single correct path, only responsive ones. You trust that even missteps will contribute to understanding. This perspective reduces anxiety around choice. Surviving prolonged uncertainty also teaches self-compassion. You recognize the effort it takes to keep going without clarity. You treat yourself with more kindness. This kindness becomes a stabilizing force. Self-trust becomes unshakable when it is no longer dependent on mood, outcome, or approval. It is grounded in lived evidence. You have seen yourself navigate difficulty. You have seen yourself recover. You have seen yourself adapt. This evidence is stronger than belief. The long way also builds patience with others. When you understand your own non-linear growth, you become more tolerant of others' processes. This reduces conflict and comparison. Relationships feel safer. Eventually, you stop fearing uncertainty because it no longer threatens your sense of self. You trust that whatever arises, you will meet it. Not perfectly, but adequately. This trust creates calm without complacency. This is the gift of the long way. It teaches you that you are safe without certainty, that you do not need to know what comes next to be okay, that your presence, adaptability, and integrity are enough to carry you forward. And once this self-trust is established, life invites you into an even deeper exploration. It begins to reshape not just your confidence, but your emotional range and resilience across the entire journey. Once self-trust becomes steady, something unexpected happens. The path no longer feels like a single road. It begins to feel like a landscape. You realize that the long way was not just taking you somewhere, it was moving you through emotional terrain you could not have accessed any other way. Hills you had to climb, valleys you had to stay in longer than you wanted, wide open spaces where nothing seemed to happen. Each part reshaped you, not by teaching ideas, but by expanding what you are able to feel without breaking. The long path has an emotional geography, even if no one names it for you. Early on, the dominant emotion is urgency. You feel pressure to move, to decide, to prove. Everything feels time-sensitive. Your nervous system stays alert, scanning for signs that you are falling behind. This stage is loud inside. Thoughts race, emotions spike quickly. You swing between hope and frustration. Resilience here is shallow because emotions change faster than you can integrate them. Then comes the stretch where urgency no longer works. You push and nothing responds. Effort does not equal movement. This is where frustration deepens into disappointment. Not dramatic disappointment, but a quiet, heavy one. This stage teaches emotional endurance. You learn how to sit with feelings that do not resolve quickly. Sadness becomes slower. Anger loses its sharp edge. You begin to notice emotional texture instead of emotional explosions. As disappointment lingers, another emotional shift occurs. Grief appears, often without a clear object. You are not grieving one thing. You are grieving expectations, timelines, imagined futures. This grief is confusing because nothing specific ended. Yet something clearly did. Staying present through this grief expands emotional range. You learn that grief does not require catastrophe. It can accompany growth. Many people try to escape this emotional region. They distract themselves, numb out, or rush into new goals. But those who stay develop resilience that cannot be taught. They discover that emotions can move through them without defining them. Grief no longer feels like collapse. It feels like release. After grief, a surprising emotion emerges. Relief, not happiness. Relief. The relief of no longer forcing yourself into shapes that don't fit. The relief of no longer chasing versions of life that exhaust you. This relief is quiet. It creates space. Emotional bandwidth increases. You can feel more without being overwhelmed. Then comes boredom, which is often misunderstood. On the long path, boredom is not emptiness. It is the absence of adrenaline. When urgency fades and crisis resolves, the nervous system rests. Boredom tests your ability to stay present without stimulation. Those who endure this phase develop emotional patience. They learn that meaning does not require constant intensity. As boredom passes, curiosity returns. Not the anxious curiosity of what's next, but a softer one. You begin to explore without pressure. Emotional flexibility increases. You can hold multiple feelings at once without needing to resolve them. Joy becomes quieter but more stable. Sadness becomes less threatening. You no longer label emotions as good or bad. They are signals, not verdicts. Another region appears later on. Ambivalence. You can see multiple truths at once. You may feel gratitude and regret together, love and disappointment, confidence and humility. Earlier in life, this would have felt confusing. Now, it feels natural. Emotional complexity becomes a strength. You stop needing simple narratives. This emotional expansion changes how you respond to life. Setbacks no longer flatten you. Success no longer destabilizes you. Your emotional range is wider, but also calmer. You are not numb. You are regulated. Detours also reshape how you experience joy. Early joy was conditional. It depended on progress, approval, or outcomes. Later joy is quieter and less dramatic, but more reliable. It comes from alignment, presence, and self-respect. You can feel joy without something happening. Resilience develops across these emotional regions, not the kind that hardens you, but the kind that softens you without weakening you. You become more emotionally literate. You recognize what you are feeling without panic. You respond rather than react. The long path also increases compassion. Having traveled through disappointment, grief, boredom, and relief, you recognize these states in others. You stop rushing people through emotions you once wanted to escape. This deepens connection. Another emotional shift happens when trust stabilizes. Fear changes quality. It no longer feels like a warning that something is wrong. It feels like a companion during growth. You listen to it without obeying it. This transforms courage. Courage becomes the ability to feel fear without letting it decide. Detours also teach emotional boundaries. You learn what drains you and what nourishes you. You stop overextending. You stop seeking validation through emotional labor. This protects energy and builds sustainable resilience. As the emotional geography becomes familiar, you stop resisting certain feelings. Loneliness no longer feels like failure. It feels like a phase. Uncertainty no longer feels like danger. It feels like transition. You stop catastrophizing internal states. One of the most important emotional capacities developed on the long path is neutrality. The ability to experience events without immediately labeling them as good or bad. This neutrality reduces suffering. It allows life to unfold without constant emotional interference. You also develop emotional memory. You remember that difficult states pass, that confusion resolves, that pain integrates. This memory provides stability during future challenges. You do not need to believe things will be easy. You know they will be survivable. The long way reshapes emotional identity. You no longer define yourself by how you feel in a moment. You identify with your capacity to hold feeling. This creates emotional freedom. You can experience sadness without becoming sad. You can experience joy without clinging. Over time, emotional resilience becomes embodied. Your body responds more calmly to stress. Your breath deepens. Your reactions slow. This is not a mindset shift. It is a physiological one. The nervous system has learned through repetition that intensity does not equal danger. This emotional geography explains why shortcuts fail. They skip emotional regions that build resilience. They produce fragile confidence. The long path produces durable calm. By moving through these stages, your emotional range expands without becoming chaotic. You become more human, not more reactive. You feel more, but suffer less. And as this emotional capacity stabilizes, life begins to use it. It places you in situations that require this resilience, not to test you, but because you are ready, which leads to the next realization. Some blocks were never obstacles at all. They were protection. As emotional resilience settles into your body, frustration begins to feel different. It no longer explodes the way it once did. It lingers, it presses, it repeats itself. And this repetition starts to raise a deeper question. Why does life keep blocking certain paths, even after you have grown, trusted, waited, and adapted? Why do some doors remain closed no matter how ready you feel? This is where another layer of understanding opens, one that reframes frustration, not as opposition, but as protection. Frustration is often the last emotion we learn to respect. It feels abrasive. It interrupts momentum. It challenges confidence. But frustration is not random. It is directional. It appears when effort meets resistance for a reason that logic alone cannot explain. Life uses frustration the way the body uses pain, not to punish, but to signal danger before damage occurs. Many paths look appealing because they promise relief. Relief from uncertainty, relief from waiting, relief from feeling incomplete. But not all relief leads to fulfillment. Some relief leads to depletion. Some paths offer comfort at the cost of depth. Others offer validation at the cost of integrity. Frustration arises when life senses that a path would hollow you out, even if it looks successful from the outside. Hollowing does not happen all at once. It happens quietly. You begin a path that seems reasonable. It pays well. It looks impressive. It earns approval. But slowly, something drains. Energy fades. Curiosity dulls. You perform more and feel less. You stay busy but disconnected. Frustration often appears before this happens, acting as an early warning system. Life blocks certain paths because they would require you to abandon parts of yourself you cannot afford to lose. Your sensitivity, your creativity, your capacity for meaning. Some environments reward numbness, some reward compliance, some reward speed over depth. Frustration is life saying this will cost you more than you think. The mind often misreads frustration as a signal to push harder. Try again, optimize, force a breakthrough, but repeated frustration is rarely asking for more effort. It is asking for re-evaluation. It asks you to question not your ability, but the direction of your effort. Frustration protects you from false alignment. False alignment feels good initially. It feels like progress, but it requires ongoing self-betrayal to maintain. You ignore discomfort. You silence intuition. You justify exhaustion. Frustration interrupts this pattern before it becomes identity. There is also a timing element. Some paths are not wrong forever. They are wrong now. Frustration keeps you from entering them prematurely. Entering too early would lock you into structures that limit growth. Life delays access not because you are incapable, but because you are still forming. Frustration also preserves complexity. Some paths demand simplification. They require you to reduce yourself to a role, a brand, a function. If your nature is complex, layered, or evolving, these paths will eventually feel suffocating. Frustration appears early to prevent long-term constriction. Many people override frustration out of fear. Fear of missing out. Fear of disappointing others. Fear of appearing ungrateful. But overriding frustration does not make it disappear. It turns into resentment, burnout, or numbness. Life prefers frustration because it is honest. It hurts, but it speaks. There is a difference between challenge and hollowing. Challenge stretches you. Hollowing drains you. Challenge feels difficult but meaningful. Hollowing feels efficient but empty. Frustration helps you tell the difference when excitement clouds judgment. Frustration also protects relationships. Some paths isolate you emotionally, even if they connect you socially. They demand long hours, constant availability, or emotional detachment. Frustration arises when life senses that connection would erode. It keeps you from environments where intimacy cannot survive. Life also uses frustration to interrupt repetition. Humans tend to repeat familiar patterns even when they no longer serve us. We chase what once worked. Frustration breaks these loops. It forces you to confront the fact that past strategies are no longer aligned with present needs. Another function of frustration is to slow identity fusion. When a path resists you, it prevents you from tying your self-worth too tightly to an outcome. This protects you from collapse if that outcome later fails. Frustration creates space between who you are and what you pursue. Frustration also sharpens discernment. When everything feels available, choice becomes shallow. When some paths resist, you are forced to ask deeper questions. Why do I want this? What am I willing to sacrifice? What am I protecting? These questions refine values. Life protects you through frustration by refusing to cooperate with versions of you that are misaligned. It does not reward effort alone. It responds to congruence. When effort is aimed in the wrong direction, frustration increases. When effort aligns with growth, even difficulty feels different. There is also a nervous system component. Some paths would keep your body in chronic stress, high stimulation, constant urgency, perpetual evaluation. Frustration appears as a bodily response before burnout sets in. Tightness, resistance, fatigue, these signals are protective. Frustration teaches patience with truth. Immediate relief often bypasses honesty. Frustration forces you to stay long enough to see clearly. It removes the option of quick escape. This clarity saves years of misdirected effort. Not all blocks are permanent. Some dissolve when you change posture, when you stop forcing, when you listen instead of pushing, when you adjust direction slightly rather than doubling down. Frustration often lifts once alignment is restored. Life also uses frustration to build respect for your own limits. You learn what no longer works. You learn what drains you. This knowledge is invaluable. It prevents future self-betrayal. Over time, you begin to recognize frustration as a guide rather than an obstacle. You stop taking it personally. You stop seeing it as failure. You ask what it is protecting. This question changes your relationship with struggle. Some of the paths you are blocked from would have rewarded you externally while eroding you internally. Frustration saved you from that trade. It preserved your depth, your sensitivity, your ability to feel. Frustration also keeps you from mistaking productivity for purpose. Some paths keep you busy but disconnected. Frustration interrupts this illusion. It reminds you that activity without alignment leads to emptiness. As you respect frustration, trust deepens further. You realize life is not withholding out of spite. It is guiding through resistance. It is protecting what matters most, even when you cannot yet see it. Eventually, frustration becomes information. You learn to read it, to pause when it appears, to reflect rather than react. This skill prevents future hollowing, and as this understanding settles, another distinction becomes clear. Trusting life does not mean waiting passively. It means learning the difference between patience and resignation. When frustration reveals itself as protection, another confusion often follows. If life is blocking certain paths for a reason, then what are you supposed to do in the meantime? This is where many people slip into a quiet despair. They stop forcing, but they also stop engaging. They call it trust, but it feels numb. This is the moment where patience is misunderstood as passivity and waiting turns into self-abandonment. To move forward from here, the difference must become clear. Patience is not the absence of action, it is the absence of panic. Passive waiting, on the other hand, is disengagement disguised as acceptance. It looks calm on the surface, but underneath it carries resentment, fear, or exhaustion. True patience is alive. It is alert. It is responsive. It requires effort, just not the kind that tries to control outcomes. Passive waiting happens when you believe you are powerless. You stop choosing, you stop adjusting, you stop listening to yourself. You tell yourself that life will decide everything, so there is no point in participating. This posture slowly erodes self-respect. You begin to feel invisible in your own life. Patience feels very different internally. It is an active inner discipline. You remain involved without forcing. You keep showing up without demanding immediate results. You refine yourself while the situation ripens. This takes more strength than pushing, because it requires you to tolerate uncertainty without collapsing into apathy. One of the clearest signs of passive waiting is emotional stagnation. Nothing changes inside. You repeat the same thoughts. You replay the same frustrations. Time passes, but integration does not happen. Patience, by contrast, is dynamic. Even when nothing changes externally, something is always shifting internally. Awareness deepens, reactions soften, insight accumulates. Trusting life does not mean sitting still and hoping for rescue. It means staying in relationship with what is happening. You observe, you respond, you adjust posture, not destination. You ask better questions instead of forcing answers. Patience requires presence. Passive waiting avoids presence by drifting into distraction or resignation. When you are patient, you are paying attention. You notice what drains you. You notice what energizes you. You notice subtle shifts in direction. This attention keeps you aligned even when progress is slow. There is also a difference in how effort feels. Passive waiting drains energy because it is filled with suppressed desire. You want things to change, but you do not engage with that desire honestly. Patience channels desire into preparation. You use the time to build capacity, clarity, and resilience. Patience respects timing without idolizing it. You do not rush life, but you also do not freeze. You continue developing skills, relationships, and self-awareness. You prepare the ground so that when opportunity appears, you are ready to step into it without scrambling. Passive waiting often comes from burnout. After too much forcing, the system shuts down. Rest is needed, but rest without re-engagement turns into stagnation. Patience includes rest, but it also includes intention. You rest to restore, not to disappear. Trusting life as an active discipline means staying honest with yourself. You admit what you want. You acknowledge frustration. You do not pretend to be detached. You simply refuse to let desire turn into desperation. This honesty keeps you connected to your inner direction. Patience also involves discernment. You do not chase every opening. You evaluate. You feel into alignment. You say no more often. Passive waiting says no to everything. Patience says no selectively so that yes remains meaningful. There is also courage involved. Patience requires you to remain visible in your own life without guarantees. You keep expressing yourself. You keep participating. Passive waiting hides behind time, hoping life will move first. One of the hardest parts of patience is tolerating ambiguity while still acting with integrity. You do not know how things will turn out, but you still choose how you show up. You treat people well. You honor commitments. You care for your body and mind. These actions are not dependent on outcome. Passive waiting disconnects behavior from values. You tell yourself values will matter later, once things are clearer. Patience makes values the anchor when clarity is missing. Patience also changes how you experience setbacks. When something does not move, you do not interpret it as confirmation that nothing ever will. You look for feedback. You adjust approach. You learn. Passive waiting interprets stillness as final. There is a quiet confidence in patience. You trust that your effort is not wasted even when results are delayed. This confidence is grounded in self-trust, not optimism. You know you can respond when conditions change. Passive waiting erodes this confidence. Over time, you doubt your ability to act. You feel rusty. You feel behind. This reinforces the myth that waiting was required, when in reality, engagement was. Patience also keeps curiosity alive. You explore without pressure. You learn without agenda. This exploration often reveals paths you would have missed if you were only waiting for permission. Trusting life actively means cooperating with what is present. If a door is closed, you stop pushing it, but you do not stop moving. You turn, you look around, you prepare, you listen. Patience is not neutral, it has direction. That direction is alignment. You are always orienting toward what feels honest, sustainable, and whole. Passive waiting has no direction. It simply endures time. The emotional tone is different as well. Patience carries calm and alertness. Passive waiting carries dullness or quiet resentment. One expands your capacity, the other shrinks it. Patience also protects against bitterness. When you remain engaged, you do not feel life is happening to you. You feel part of the process. Passive waiting creates distance, which breeds resentment. Trusting life does not mean stepping out of your own life. It means stepping into it without trying to dominate it. This balance is subtle and powerful. Over time, patience builds momentum. Not fast momentum, but stable momentum. You are ready when movement returns. You do not panic. You do not overreach. You integrate change smoothly. Passive waiting leaves you unprepared. When things finally shift, you feel overwhelmed. You rush. You doubt yourself. This reinforces the belief that waiting was necessary when preparation was. Patience is an inner discipline because it requires daily choice. You choose presence over avoidance. You choose alignment over control. You choose engagement over resignation. Life responds to this discipline, not always immediately but reliably. Opportunities meet readiness. Clarity meets patience. Movement meets preparation. Trusting life, then, is not a passive stance. It is a form of participation that does not rely on force. It is effort without aggression, commitment without attachment. As this distinction becomes clear, another realization begins to form. Sometimes, when nothing seems to be working, it is not because you are stuck. It is because something is integrating beneath the surface. When patience becomes active and resignation falls away, there is still a phase that unsettles almost everyone. A phase where you are present, aligned, no longer forcing, yet nothing seems to respond. You are doing the inner work. You are showing up. You are staying honest. And still, externally, it looks like nothing is working. This is the moment most people quietly turn against themselves. But this moment deserves a different understanding because stagnation is not always failure. Often it is consolidation. There are times when life stops producing visible results because it is reorganizing something deeper. Growth does not always express itself through movement. Sometimes it expresses itself through stillness. This stillness feels uncomfortable because it offers no feedback. You cannot point to progress. You cannot measure advancement. And in a world that values visibility, this feels like falling apart. But internally, something very real is happening. Integration is the process of bringing separate parts into coherence. It is when lessons stop being ideas and start becoming behavior. It is when emotional insight becomes embodied response. It is when new values settle into decision-making without effort. This process is slow and quiet. It cannot happen while you are constantly producing or reacting. It requires space. When nothing seems to be working, it is often because your system is digesting what it has already taken in. Just like the body pauses activity to heal or rebuild, the psyche pauses expansion to integrate. If you force movement during this phase, you interrupt consolidation. You create fragmentation instead of strength. Stagnation feels threatening because it challenges the belief that progress must be continuous. But continuous output is not how systems become resilient. They become resilient through cycles of stress and recovery. Integration is recovery at the psychological and emotional level. Many people misinterpret stagnation as incompetence. They assume they are doing something wrong. They search for new strategies, new methods, new goals. But often, the issue is not lack of effort. It is lack of space. You cannot integrate while constantly reaching for the next thing. Integration requires repetition. You encounter similar situations and respond slightly differently. You notice old triggers no longer hijack you. You realize reactions that once felt automatic now feel optional. These changes are subtle. They do not announce themselves, but they are signs of deep progress. When nothing is working externally, your inner world is often aligning internally. Beliefs are adjusting. Emotional responses are recalibrating. Identity is stabilizing. These changes take time because they involve rewiring patterns that have been in place for years. Stagnation also removes distraction. When life stops moving, you cannot hide behind activity. You face boredom, restlessness, and self-doubt. These feelings are not obstacles. They are signals of parts that still seek validation through motion. Integration teaches these parts how to exist without constant stimulation. There is also grief involved in integration. You grieve old versions of yourself that no longer function. You grieve identities that gave you momentum but no longer fit. This grief slows you down, but it also clears space. Without grieving, integration remains incomplete. When nothing is working, comparison often returns. You look around and see others moving. This intensifies self-judgment. But integration does not follow shared timelines. It follows internal readiness. Comparing during this phase only creates pressure that disrupts the process. Integration also builds trust in subtlety. You learn to notice small shifts instead of dramatic change, increased calm, better boundaries, quicker recovery after disappointment. These are signs that internal systems are reorganizing. Stagnation can feel empty because old motivations have dissolved and new ones have not yet formed. This gap is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. If new motivation arrived too quickly, it would simply repeat old patterns with new language. When nothing seems to be working, life is often teaching you how to exist without striving. This does not mean losing ambition. It means decoupling worth from output. You learn that you are allowed to exist without producing visible results. This lesson is essential for long-term fulfillment. Integration also refines intention. You stop chasing vague goals. You become more precise about what you want and why. This precision prevents future misalignment. There is a nervous system component here as well. Constant effort keeps the system in a heightened state. Integration requires regulation. The body learns how to operate without chronic stress. This recalibration improves focus, creativity, and emotional balance. Many breakthroughs fail because integration was skipped. People change circumstances without changing internal structure. This leads to repetition. Integration ensures that when movement resumes, it is sustainable. Stagnation also teaches restraint. You learn not to act on every impulse. You learn to let things develop. This restraint is not suppression, it is discernment. When nothing is working, patience deepens, not as tolerance but as confidence. You trust that movement will return when consolidation is complete. This trust is grounded in experience, not belief. Integration also strengthens identity. You stop defining yourself by roles or achievements. You become more stable internally. This stability supports future growth. The fear during stagnation is that you will be left behind. But integration often propels you forward later in ways that would not have been possible without this pause. The growth is not delayed. It is redirected. There is also a simplification that occurs. You let go of unnecessary complexity, you reduce noise, you clarify priorities. This simplification makes future decisions easier. Stagnation teaches you how to stay present without reward. This builds integrity. You are no longer performing for outcomes. You are living according to values. When nothing is working, it is often because life is making sure that what works next does not break you. It is ensuring that strength matches opportunity. Integration is invisible, but it is not passive. It is active reorganization. It is the quiet work that makes visible success possible. As this consolidation completes, you begin to feel ready in a way that does not rely on excitement. Readiness feels calm, grounded, unforced, and when movement returns, it does not feel like rescue, it feels like continuation. This understanding prepares you for the next realization. Fast success often collapses, not because it is undeserved, but because the system cannot hold it. When integration completes and movement begins to return, there is often an unexpected reaction. Instead of pure excitement, there is hesitation. Instead of celebration, there is caution. This surprises many people. After everything you endured, shouldn't joy come easily? But this moment reveals something essential. Joy, like pressure, has weight, and not everyone knows how to carry it. The long way does not only prepare you for hardship, it prepares you for joy. This is something rarely discussed, yet deeply important. Fast success often collapses not because it is undeserved, but because the nervous system is unprepared to hold what arrives. Pleasure, freedom, love, and opportunity all require capacity. Without that capacity, joy becomes overwhelming rather than nourishing. Early in life, joy is often tied to relief. You feel happy when pain stops, when effort finally pays off, when tension releases. This kind of joy is sharp and short-lived. It spikes and fades. It depends on contrast. When success comes quickly, joy surges, but the system has not learned how to regulate it. The excitement becomes anxiety, the freedom becomes fear. The gain becomes something you feel you might lose. The long way teaches regulation. Through delay, frustration, and uncertainty, your nervous system learns how to stay balanced without constant reward. This balance is what allows joy to land softly instead of crashing through you. You learn how to feel good without panicking, how to enjoy without clinging, how to receive without bracing. Fast success often creates hypervigilance. You scan for threats. You worry about maintaining what you have. The system stays activated. Joy becomes conditional. You cannot relax into it. The long way prevents this by normalizing uncertainty. When joy arrives after prolonged uncertainty, it feels familiar rather than threatening. You trust that change is survivable. Joy requires openness, but openness without regulation leads to overwhelm. The long path gradually expands your window of tolerance. You learn how to stay open while grounded. This is why joy feels different later in life. It is quieter, steadier, and more integrated. There is also an emotional maturity that develops on the long way. You learn that joy does not erase complexity. You can feel grateful and cautious at the same time. You can feel happy without believing everything is resolved. This layered joy is sustainable. It does not demand perfection. Fast success often collapses relationships because joy amplifies unresolved dynamics. Envy, imbalance, and insecurity surface. The long way gives relationships time to evolve alongside you. Shared growth creates shared capacity for joy. The long path also teaches you to separate joy from identity. When joy arrives slowly, you do not fuse your sense of self to it. You appreciate it without defining yourself by it. This prevents loss from becoming identity collapse. There is a bodily component as well. The nervous system learns through repetition. Prolonged effort followed by small wins teaches gradual regulation. Sudden reward shocks the system. This is why people often sabotage happiness. It feels unsafe. The long way teaches safety first. Joy also requires trust. Trust that you can have something good without it being taken away immediately. This trust is built through surviving loss, disappointment, and uncertainty. Once you know you can endure pain, you are no longer afraid of pleasure. The long way reshapes joy into something inhabitable. You do not rush through it. You do not consume it. You live inside it. This changes how fulfillment feels. It becomes spacious rather than intense. Fast success creates pressure to perform happiness. You feel obligated to be grateful, excited, and satisfied. This performance disconnects you from authentic experience. The long way removes this pressure. Joy is allowed to be subtle. You also learn how to pace joy. You let it unfold naturally. You do not overwhelm yourself with stimulation. You allow enjoyment to integrate into daily life rather than peak and crash. There is also grief mixed with joy on the long path. Grief for what it took to get here. Grief for versions of you that did not survive. This grief does not cancel joy. It deepens it. Joy becomes more meaningful because it is honest. The long way also teaches you how to share joy without comparison. You are not using joy to prove anything. You are not seeking validation. This makes joy relational rather than performative. Fast success often collapses because it skips emotional training. The long way is training. It teaches you how to hold intensity, freedom, and possibility without losing yourself. Eventually, joy stops feeling like an event and starts feeling like a tone, a background steadiness, a sense of okayness that does not depend on circumstances. This is the kind of joy that lasts. And as you learn to carry joy, another pattern becomes clear. The urge to control outcomes often comes from fear, not ambition. As joy becomes something you can hold without panic, another truth quietly surfaces. Much of what once looked like drive, discipline, or ambition was actually fear in disguise, the need to manage everything, the urge to predict outcomes, the compulsion to stay ahead of uncertainty. When joy no longer overwhelms you, you begin to see how much energy was spent trying to control life rather than live it. This is where trusting life starts to heal control at its root. Control addiction rarely feels like fear. It feels responsible. It feels mature. It feels like being prepared. But underneath it is a deep belief that if you loosen your grip, something bad will happen. Control is not about wanting more. It is about being afraid of loss, afraid of pain, afraid of repeating past experiences where you felt powerless. Most control patterns are formed early. At some point, life felt unpredictable, unsafe, or emotionally overwhelming. Control became a coping strategy. Planning, fixing, anticipating, and managing created a sense of safety. Over time, this strategy hardened into identity. You became the one who handles things, who stays on top, who never lets things fall apart. But what once protected you eventually limits you. Control requires constant vigilance. The nervous system never fully rests. You are always scanning for what might go wrong. Even in good moments, part of you stays braced. Joy cannot fully land because it feels temporary. Trust feels naive. Relaxation feels dangerous. Trusting life begins to heal this because it introduces a different source of safety. Instead of safety coming from prediction, it comes from capacity. You learn that you can respond to what happens rather than prevent everything from happening. This is a profound shift. It moves safety from the future into the present. Control addiction thrives on the belief that outcomes define survival. If this works, I'm safe. If it fails, I'm not. Trust dismantles this belief slowly, through experience. You live through outcomes you tried to avoid. You adapt. You recover. You realize that survival was never as fragile as you thought. The long way plays a crucial role here. Prolonged uncertainty repeatedly exposes the limits of control. You plan and plans change. You prepare and life redirects. Over time, forcing stops working. Not because you are weak, but because life is more complex than any strategy. This repeated exposure softens control's grip. Control addiction also distorts motivation. You tell yourself you are pushing because you want success, but often you are pushing because stillness brings anxiety. Trusting life allows stillness without collapse. This reveals which actions come from fear and which come from alignment. When fear-driven control loosens, ambition changes shape. It becomes less aggressive and more intentional. You still care, you still strive, but you are no longer fighting reality. You move with conditions rather than against them. This makes effort more efficient, not less. There is also an emotional healing that occurs. Control often suppresses vulnerability. You do not allow yourself to feel fear, sadness, or uncertainty fully because you believe feeling them will impair function. Trust allows these emotions to exist without immediate correction. This reduces their intensity. What is allowed passes more easily than what is managed. Control addiction also creates rigidity in identity. You believe you must be a certain way to be safe. Trust allows identity to soften. You can be unsure. You can change your mind. You can rest. This flexibility reduces internal pressure. Trusting life also heals control by changing your relationship with mistakes. When control dominates, mistakes feel catastrophic. They threaten self-worth. With trust, mistakes become information. You adjust without self-punishment. This encourages learning rather than perfectionism. There is a nervous system shift that happens here. Chronic control keeps the system in a heightened state. Trust introduces regulation. Breath deepens, muscles soften, thoughts slow. This is not mental. It is physiological. The body learns that it does not need to be on guard constantly. As regulation increases, you become more responsive and less reactive. You notice urges to control without acting on them immediately. This pause is powerful. It creates choice. You can ask, is this action coming from fear or from alignment? Trusting life also reduces the need to micromanage others. Control addiction often extends outward. You manage people, conversations, and outcomes. Trust allows others to be themselves. This improves relationships. It reduces conflict and resentment. Control addiction often masks a fear of disappointment. You try to control outcomes to avoid being let down. Trust teaches you how to experience disappointment without collapse. Once disappointment is survivable, control loses urgency. There is also grief involved in healing control. You grieve the years spent bracing. You grieve the energy lost to worry. This grief is not self-blame. It is recognition. It allows compassion for the part of you that learned control to survive. Trusting life does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means redefining it. Responsibility shifts from managing outcomes to managing response. You are responsible for how you show up, not for how everything turns out. This distinction is liberating. It reduces burnout. You stop carrying weight that was never yours. You stop confusing influence with control. As trust deepens, control urges still appear, but they are quieter. You recognize them as signals of fear rather than commands. You meet fear with reassurance instead of strategy. This is healing. Trust also increases creativity. Control limits possibility. It sticks to known paths. Trust opens exploration. You are willing to try, adjust, and learn. This leads to innovation and growth. The long way ensures this healing is stable. It does not happen through insight alone. It happens through repeated, lived experience of letting go and surviving. Each time you loosen control and nothing collapses, trust strengthens. Eventually, control no longer feels necessary, not because life is safe, but because you are capable. This capability is the foundation of mature trust. And as control addiction heals, something else begins to dissolve. The need to cling to old identities weakens. Life prepares you for another kind of release. As the need to control loosens and fear loses its authority, a deeper discomfort often rises. It does not feel like anxiety. It feels like absence. The familiar sense of who you are begins to fade. Old labels no longer fit. Old motivations no longer drive you. You still function, but something essential feels missing. This is the moment many people panic and try to rebuild themselves too quickly. But this moment is not loss. It is transition. It is the beginning of identity death. Identity death sounds dramatic, but it rarely looks dramatic from the outside. It looks like confusion without urgency, like detachment from things that once defined you, like losing interest in roles you once fought to protect. This is unsettling because identity has always been your anchor. It told you how to behave, what to pursue, what mattered. When it dissolves, it feels like floating without gravity. But identity does not dissolve randomly. It dissolves because it can no longer function in the life you are growing into. Who you were was shaped by past conditions, past fears, past limitations, past environments. That identity helped you survive, navigate, and belong. But survival-based identities often cannot support expansion. They are built to protect, not to express. The long path requires an identity that can hold complexity, responsibility, intimacy, and freedom. Old identities often cannot do this. They rely on control, validation, or certainty. They function well in constrained environments but collapse in open ones. Identity death clears space for something more adaptable to emerge. This process feels threatening because the mind equates identity with existence. If I am not this, then who am I? The fear is not of change, but of disappearance. But identity death is not erasure, it is reorganization. The core remains, the structure changes. Identity death often begins when your old identity stops producing meaning. You achieve what it wanted and feel empty, or you fail and realize it cannot carry you through loss. Either way, its limitations become visible. The discomfort that follows is not failure, it is exposure. Many people try to skip identity death by upgrading their identity instead of releasing it. They add new labels, new goals, new personas. But this keeps the old structure intact. It delays the inevitable. The long path does not allow this. It removes reinforcement until release becomes unavoidable. Identity death is slow because it involves disentangling self-worth from roles. You stop being the achiever, the fixer, the caretaker, the rebel, the responsible one. Each role carried emotional rewards. Letting go means facing the fear that without these roles, you will not be valued. This fear is rooted in early conditioning. At some point you learned that being a certain way earned safety or love. That lesson became identity. Identity death revisits that lesson and updates it. You learn that existence does not depend on performance. During identity death, motivation often disappears. This is frightening. You are used to being driven. Suddenly, effort feels hollow. This is not laziness. It is misalignment. The old fuel no longer works. New fuel has not arrived yet. This phase requires patience because the new identity cannot be forced. It emerges organically from integration, from lived experience, from values that settle through reflection rather than ambition. Identity death also affects relationships. People who knew you through your old roles may struggle to relate to you. Some distance naturally forms. This can feel lonely, but it is not abandonment. It is realignment. Relationships that depend on outdated versions cannot grow with you. There is also grief involved. You grieve who you thought you would be. You grieve the effort you invested. You grieve the certainty you once had. This grief is necessary. Without it, the old identity lingers as nostalgia, pulling you backward. Identity death creates a period of neutrality. You are not who you were. You are not yet who you will be. This neutrality feels empty, but it is fertile. It allows experimentation without commitment. You explore interests without labeling them. You act without defining yourself by the action. This stage teaches humility. You no longer know exactly who you are. You listen more, you observe more, you become curious rather than certain. This humility prevents premature crystallization of a new identity that would be just as limiting. The long path ensures identity death is complete rather than partial. Partial identity death creates conflict. You cling to some aspects while trying to change others. Complete identity death allows coherence. The new identity functions as a whole rather than a patchwork. Identity death also liberates energy. Maintaining an outdated identity requires effort. You justify choices. You defend roles. You manage perception. When that identity dissolves, this effort stops. Energy becomes available for presence and creativity. There is fear in this freedom at first. Without identity, you cannot predict yourself. But this unpredictability is not chaos. It is openness. It allows you to respond authentically rather than habitually. The new identity that emerges is quieter. It does not announce itself. It does not rely on contrast. It is not built against something. It is built from alignment. It feels less dramatic, but more stable. This new identity can function in uncertainty because it is not dependent on external validation. It can adapt because it is not rigid. It can rest because it does not confuse worth with productivity. Identity death also deepens compassion. You recognize how much of behavior is shaped by identity protection. You become less judgmental of others who cling to roles. You see fear beneath performance. The long path requires this identity shift because the destination demands integrity rather than image, depth rather than speed, presence rather than control. Old identities cannot sustain these demands. Eventually, you notice that decisions feel simpler, not because there are fewer options, but because you know what no longer fits. The new identity is defined as much by what it refuses as by what it chooses. Identity death also restores authenticity. You stop acting from scripts. You respond from awareness. This authenticity feels calm. You are not trying to be someone. You are allowing yourself to be shaped. There is relief in this. You no longer need to prove continuity. You are allowed to change. You are allowed to evolve. This permission creates lightness. The long path makes identity death unavoidable because it values coherence over comfort. It does not let you carry identities that cannot survive the life ahead. This is not cruelty, it is precision. Once identity death completes, you are not empty. You are grounded. You are not defined by past roles. You are oriented by present values. And with this new orientation, life introduces another kind of test. It begins to remove options, not to limit you, but to deepen faith in what cannot yet be seen. When identity loosens and the old self no longer pulls you backward, life does something that feels both clarifying and terrifying. Possibilities begin to disappear. Doors you once considered stay firmly closed. Backup plans fall away, choices narrow. This is often the moment people feel trapped or punished. But this narrowing is not abandonment, it is instruction. It is life teaching you how to commit without certainty, how to walk forward without visible safety nets. Having many options feels empowering. It creates the illusion of freedom. You can pivot. You can escape discomfort. You can delay commitment by telling yourself you are still exploring. But too many options also keep you unrooted. You never have to go all in. You never have to risk disappointment fully. You never have to trust something you cannot yet see. Life knows this. So when you are ready for deeper growth, it begins to remove alternatives. When options disappear, anxiety often spikes. You feel exposed. You can no longer hedge your bets. You cannot say, if this doesn't work, I'll just do that. The future feels fragile. This fragility is not a flaw. It is the doorway to faith. Faith is often misunderstood as belief without evidence. But real faith is commitment without control. It is choosing a direction without proof. It is staying aligned without guarantees. Narrowing options forces this kind of faith because it removes the comfort of escape. Life removes options gradually, rarely all at once. One path stops responding, another loses energy, a third becomes inaccessible. At first you try to reopen them, you analyze, you negotiate, you push, but eventually resistance remains. This persistence is a signal. Life is asking you to stop keeping one foot out of the door. Keeping options open feels safe, but it divides energy. You never fully inhabit a path. You are always scanning for alternatives. This prevents depth. Narrowing choices concentrates energy. It forces presence. You can no longer live half-committed. There is grief in this narrowing. You grieve the comfort of possibility. You grieve the identities attached to different paths. You grieve the fantasy of unlimited freedom. This grief is real, but it is also cleansing. It clears space for something focused to grow. When life removes options, it is often because exploration has done its job. You have learned enough. You have gathered insight. Now it is time to integrate through commitment. Without commitment, knowledge remains abstract. Faith grows when you choose despite uncertainty, not reckless choice, but aligned choice. You listen to what still has life in it, what still pulls quietly, what still feels honest, even when it scares you. This listening replaces strategy. Narrowing options also reveals attachment. You see which paths you cling to out of fear rather than alignment. You see which backups exist only to soothe anxiety. Life removes these to teach you that soothing does not equal safety. There is also a maturity in choosing when options are limited. You stop chasing novelty. You invest in depth. You learn that meaning is built through staying, not sampling. Life removes options to build faith in your own capacity to commit. Commitment does not mean certainty. It means willingness. Willingness to show up, to adapt, to learn, to stay engaged even when outcomes are unclear. This stage often feels lonely. Fewer options mean fewer people walking alongside you. Some relationships were tied to alternative paths. As those paths close, distance appears. This loneliness is not punishment. It is simplification. It reduces noise. Narrowing choices also strengthens integrity. When you have fewer options, values matter more. You cannot rely on flexibility to escape consequences. You must choose in alignment. This builds self-respect. Life also uses narrowing to protect focus. Too many directions dilute effort. Narrowing sharpens it. You become more precise, more intentional, less scattered. There is fear here because narrowing removes the illusion of control. You cannot plan your way out. You must trust your ability to respond rather than predict. This trust deepens faith. Faith is not passive belief. It is active engagement without proof. It is continuing to care without reassurance. It is choosing to act even when the future remains undefined. When options disappear, you may question your worth. Why am I not being offered more? But this is not about worth. It is about readiness. Life is not offering less. It is offering depth. Narrowing choices also ends comparison. When you cannot switch lanes easily, you stop watching other lanes. You focus on your own road. This reduces anxiety. Life removes options when staying undecided would become avoidance. Decision is not the enemy of freedom. Indecision is. Narrowing pushes you into decision. This decision is rarely dramatic. It is quiet. It feels like settling into something rather than chasing it. It feels heavier at first, then steadier. Faith grows each time you choose without seeing the whole picture and discover you are still okay. This lived experience builds confidence that belief alone cannot. Narrowing also exposes ego. Ego wants options to maintain superiority, to feel exceptional. Faith requires humility. It accepts not knowing. Life teaches commitment to the unseen by removing what is seen. You can no longer rely on visible markers. You must trust internal alignment. This stage often coincides with reduced external validation. Fewer people understand your path. Approval drops. This strengthens intrinsic motivation. Faith also deepens patience. When you cannot switch directions easily, you learn to wait within commitment rather than escape it. This patience is powerful. Life removes options to help you experience sufficiency. You learn that one path is enough. One direction is enough. You do not need everything. There is relief hidden in narrowing. Once resistance fades, energy stabilizes. You stop evaluating constantly. You begin living. Faith is built through repetition. Each day you recommit without proof. Each day you choose alignment over comfort. This repetition makes faith embodied. The unseen future becomes less frightening because you are no longer trying to see it. You are walking toward it. Narrowing options also clarifies responsibility. You stop blaming circumstances. You own your choices. This ownership builds strength. Life does not remove options to limit you. It removes them to deepen you, to teach you how to stand without leaning on contingency. And once faith stabilizes, another understanding begins to emerge. The long way is not only psychological, it follows a deeper law of meaning itself. When faith steadies and commitment no longer needs proof, a deeper pattern begins to reveal itself. You start to notice that the long way was never just psychological or practical. It followed a quieter logic, a kind of inner law. The longer something takes, the more it seems to matter. The more effort it requires, the more it reshapes you. The more emotionally exposed you are, the deeper the meaning settles. This is not coincidence. This is how meaning is formed. There is a kind of gravity to things that take time. They pull you inward. They demand presence. They refuse to be consumed quickly. Fast experiences pass through you. Slow ones stay. They leave residue. They change how you see yourself and the world. This is the spiritual physics of taking longer. Meaning does not attach itself to convenience. It attaches itself to investment. When something costs you time, attention, patience, and vulnerability, it begins to matter in a way nothing instant ever can. This is why shortcuts feel empty even when they work. They bypass the conditions that allow meaning to form. Time is not just duration, it is exposure. The longer you stay with something, the more layers of yourself it touches. Early enthusiasm gives way to doubt. Doubt gives way to discipline. Discipline gives way to humility. Humility gives way to depth. Each layer adds weight. Meaning accumulates. Effort also changes meaning. Effort is not about strain. It is about showing up repeatedly without certainty. Effort teaches commitment. It teaches you how to stay when novelty fades. Without effort, experiences remain shallow. They entertain but do not transform. Emotional exposure is the final ingredient. When something asks you to feel deeply, to risk disappointment, to tolerate uncertainty, meaning takes root. Emotional exposure makes experiences personal. They stop being abstract. They become part of your inner narrative. This is why the long way changes how you value things. What you struggled for becomes precious. What came easily becomes replaceable. This is not because struggle is virtuous, but because struggle creates relationship. You are no longer consuming an experience. You are participating in it. The spiritual physics here is simple but unforgiving. Depth requires time. Integration requires effort. Meaning requires vulnerability. Remove any one of these and the experience remains thin. Life understands this even when you do not. This is why it resists acceleration. It is not withholding, it is preserving depth. It is making sure that what you gain does not float on the surface of your life but anchors into who you are. Meaning deepens when you have to wait because waiting exposes motivation. You learn why you want what you want. You learn whether desire survives discomfort. This clarity strengthens intention. Meaning deepens when effort is sustained, because sustained effort reveals character. You see how you respond when results are delayed. You see whether you become bitter, resigned, or resilient. This self-knowledge becomes part of the meaning. Meaning deepens through emotional exposure because emotions are the language of integration. They translate experience into wisdom. Without emotion, experience remains data. With emotion, it becomes insight. The long way also stretches time in a way that changes perception. You stop measuring progress in milestones and start measuring it in understanding. You notice subtle shifts, increased patience, better discernment. These shifts are invisible to others but deeply meaningful to you. Fast paths often skip emotional exposure. They reward performance and efficiency. But without emotional engagement, success feels hollow. You achieve without connecting. The long way refuses this. It requires you to feel everything along the way. There is also a sacredness that develops through repetition. Doing something over and over without immediate reward creates reverence. You stop taking it lightly. You respect the process. This respect deepens meaning. The long way also introduces reverence for effort itself. You learn that effort is not just a means to an end. It is a form of devotion. You are devoting time, energy, and attention to something that matters. This devotion gives life texture. Meaning also deepens through uncertainty. When outcomes are unknown, you cannot rely on expectation. You must stay present. Presence is where meaning lives. Certainty often pulls you out of the moment. Uncertainty anchors you in it. There is also a humility that comes from taking longer. You recognize your limits. You respect complexity. You stop believing everything should bend to your timeline. This humility makes meaning more durable. The long way also creates coherence. When something unfolds slowly, different parts of your life have time to align with it. Relationships adapt, values adjust, identity evolves. Meaning becomes integrated rather than isolated. Fast success often creates fragmentation. Life changes faster than integration can occur. Meaning cannot keep up. This leads to emptiness despite achievement. Time allows reflection. Reflection turns experience into understanding. Without reflection, experience remains raw. The long way creates natural pauses for reflection. These pauses are not delays. They are meaning makers. Effort also creates memory. You remember what you worked for. You remember obstacles. These memories become reference points. They guide future decisions. They give context. Emotional exposure creates attachment, but not the unhealthy kind. It creates care. You care because you felt, you invested, you risked. This care makes meaning personal rather than conceptual. The spiritual physics of taking longer also explains why meaning cannot be forced. You cannot manufacture it through intensity. You cannot compress it through strategy. Meaning emerges when conditions are met, not when demanded. Life often removes speed to restore meaning. It slows you down so you can feel what you are doing. It interrupts momentum so you can ask why. This is not inefficiency, it is alignment. Taking longer also builds trust in process. You learn that not everything valuable is visible immediately. This trust reduces anxiety. You stop rushing meaning. You allow it to form. Meaning deepens as you carry effort through disappointment. Disappointment refines intention. It strips away fantasy. What remains is commitment. This commitment is meaningful because it is honest. Emotional exposure also expands empathy. You recognize struggle in others. You respect journeys that take time. This shared understanding deepens connection. The long way also teaches restraint. You learn not to grab meaning prematurely. You let experiences mature. This patience prevents distortion. There is also a paradox here. The longer something takes, the less you obsess over outcome. You become absorbed in the process. Meaning shifts from destination to participation. Fast paths often collapse because they demand meaning without investment. They expect fulfillment without vulnerability. This is not how meaning works. The spiritual physics of the long way is not moral, it is structural. It describes how inner systems integrate experience. Ignore it and emptiness follows. Work with it and depth emerges. As meaning deepens, it becomes less dependent on explanation. You feel it, you carry it. You do not need to justify it. This quiet confidence is the mark of true meaning. Time, effort, and emotional exposure are not obstacles to fulfillment. They are the ingredients. Remove them, and life feels thin. Embrace them, and life feels weighted with significance. The long way is not slow because you are behind. It is slow because meaning is forming. And once this meaning settles, it changes how you respond to the world. You stop being impressed by speed. You stop chasing shortcuts. You recognize depth when you see it, and as this recognition stabilizes, another shift occurs. You become less impressed by appearances and more grounded in what lasts. As meaning settles into your life and no longer needs explanation, something else quietly changes. You stop being moved so easily. Things that once dazzled you now feel loud. Promises that once excited you now feel thin. You notice a calm distance growing between you and the need to be impressed. This is not indifference, it is discernment, and it is one of the most natural outcomes of taking the long way. Being impressible is not a flaw. Early in life, it is a survival tool. You look outward to understand what matters. You pay attention to status, success, confidence, charisma. These signals help you orient yourself in a complex world. But as the long path reshapes you, these external signals lose their authority. You no longer need them to tell you who you are or where you are going. Extended journeys strip away the hunger for validation because validation thrives on speed. It thrives on comparison. It thrives on visibility. The long way removes all three. Progress becomes slow, comparison becomes irrelevant, visibility fades. Without these conditions, validation loses its power. There is nothing to feed it. At first, this feels uncomfortable. You may notice a strange emptiness when praise no longer satisfies you. Compliments land, but they do not lift you. Criticism arrives, but it does not crush you. This neutrality can feel confusing because you are used to emotional spikes, but this is not numbness, it is regulation. The need for approval is rooted in uncertainty about self-worth. When you do not yet trust your own sense of value, you look to others for confirmation. The long way removes opportunities for constant confirmation. You must continue without applause. Over time, you learn that your worth does not fluctuate with reaction. This lesson cannot be taught. It must be lived. Extended journeys also reveal how fragile external validation is. Praise comes and goes. Attention shifts. Trends change. If your sense of self depends on these things, you are constantly destabilized. The long way forces you to build something more stable. Internal coherence replaces external approval. As you spend more time walking without recognition, you begin to notice what truly satisfies you. Alignment feels better than applause. Integrity feels better than admiration. Presence feels better than performance. These realizations change your motivation. You no longer do things to be seen. You do them because they are honest. This shift makes you less reactive to other people's opinions. You listen without absorbing. You consider without internalizing. You can take feedback without losing yourself. This is not defensiveness, it is grounding. Extended journeys also expose the performative nature of much of what is celebrated. Confidence without depth, success without fulfillment, certainty without wisdom. These things once looked impressive because you had not yet lived through their consequences. Now you have context. You can see the cost beneath the surface. Being less impressible does not mean becoming cynical. Cynicism dismisses everything. Discernment distinguishes. You can still admire skill, dedication, and creativity, but you are no longer seduced by image alone. Substance matters. The long way also strips away the urge to prove yourself. Proof is only necessary when something feels uncertain internally. As self-trust grows, proof becomes unnecessary. You know who you are becoming. You do not need witnesses. This changes how you show up socially. You speak less, but with more intention. You listen more. You are not trying to impress or be impressed. Conversations become more real. Relationships deepen because they are no longer transactional. Extended journeys also reduce comparison. When you stop chasing approval, you stop measuring yourself against others. Their success no longer threatens you. Their failure no longer comforts you. You are not using others as mirrors. You are grounded in your own path. The need for validation also fades because you have survived without it. You know you can continue even when no one notices. This knowledge is freeing. It gives you permission to move at your own pace. Being less impressible also changes how you consume information. You are less drawn to grand promises, dramatic claims, and exaggerated certainty. You value nuance. You appreciate honesty about complexity. This protects you from manipulation. Extended journeys teach you that loudness is often compensation. Those who are secure rarely need to announce it. Those who are aligned rarely need to convince. This understanding makes you quieter, not smaller. You also become less impressed by speed. Quick results no longer impress you because you know what they often skip: integration, depth, stability. You respect things that last, not things that appear. This shift affects ambition as well. You still care about growth, but you are no longer motivated by recognition. Your goals become more personal, more values-based. This makes them sustainable. Being less impressible also reduces envy. When you are no longer chasing approval, you stop envying those who have it. You recognize that visibility often comes with costs you are not willing to pay. This clarity brings peace. Extended journeys also change your relationship with authority. You respect experience, not titles. Wisdom, not confidence. You are less likely to defer blindly. You think critically without becoming dismissive. The long way removes the urgency to be right. Being right is often a way to feel superior or safe. When you no longer need validation, you can hold uncertainty without defensiveness. You can change your mind without shame. This makes you more open, more curious, less reactive. You do not need to win conversations. You value understanding over dominance. Being less impressible also protects you emotionally. You are less affected by social comparison, trends, and external pressure. This stability supports mental health. You are not constantly adjusting your self-image based on feedback. Extended journeys teach you how little approval actually changes your life. It feels good momentarily, but it does not create meaning. Living aligned does. This realization shifts priorities. You may notice that you no longer feel drawn to environments that thrive on validation, competitive spaces, performative cultures. You prefer places where depth is valued, where growth is quiet. This preference may reduce your social circle, but it increases its quality. Relationships become less about status and more about substance. Being less impressible also makes you harder to manipulate. Marketing, persuasion, and pressure lose their effectiveness. You are not easily swayed by promises of recognition or belonging. You choose consciously. Extended journeys also reveal that admiration often hides insecurity. Those who need to be admired are often seeking reassurance. Understanding this softens judgment. You respond with compassion rather than envy. The long way does not make you immune to praise or criticism. It simply makes them less central. They become information, not identity. This shift is one of the quiet gifts of the long path. You are no longer living for an audience. You are living in relationship with your values. As the need for validation fades and external approval loses its grip, another quiet challenge appears. The excitement that once carried you forward begins to thin out. The emotional charge that fueled effort no longer shows up on demand. You are not lost. You are not doubting your path. You are simply no longer motivated in the way you once were. This moment unsettles people because motivation is often mistaken for alignment. When motivation disappears, many assume the path must be wrong. But this moment is not a signal to turn back. It is an invitation to learn a deeper form of trust. Motivation is unreliable by nature. It rises and falls with mood, novelty, recognition, and energy. Early on, motivation feels essential because it compensates for uncertainty. It provides momentum when identity is still forming. But as the long way reshapes you, motivation becomes less central. Alignment does not always feel inspiring. Sometimes it feels neutral. Sometimes it feels heavy. Sometimes it feels quiet. Learning to continue without motivation is one of the most important skills the long path teaches. When motivation is gone, belief often fades with it. You stop feeling certain. You stop feeling excited about outcomes. This can feel dangerous because belief has always been used as fuel. But belief is also fragile. It depends on narrative. It depends on hope. When belief fades, what remains is commitment. Commitment is quieter. It does not promise reward. It simply continues. Remaining aligned without motivation requires a shift from emotional drive to values-based action. You stop asking, "What do I feel like doing?" and start asking, "What reflects who I am becoming?" This question does not require excitement. It requires honesty. You act not because you feel inspired, but because the action fits your values. This stage feels empty because the old rewards are gone and the new ones have not yet revealed themselves. You are no longer fueled by recognition, novelty, or anticipation. You are fueled by integrity. This fuel burns slower, but it burns longer. Trusting life when motivation is gone means trusting the path even when it feels ordinary. You continue showing up without emotional reinforcement. This consistency builds character. It trains you to move based on alignment rather than feeling. Many people quit here because they interpret lack of motivation as failure. But lack of motivation often means you have graduated from needing emotional incentives. You no longer require constant reassurance to stay engaged. This is maturity, not stagnation. When belief fades, doubt often fills the space. Doubt asks hard questions. Why am I doing this? Does this still matter? Is this worth it? These questions are not enemies. They refine intention. They strip away fantasy. They clarify commitment. Trusting life here means allowing doubt without letting it decide. You listen to doubt, but you do not obey it blindly. You recognize that doubt often appears when old narratives dissolve. New meaning has not yet formed. Remaining aligned without motivation also requires pacing. You stop overextending. You conserve energy. You do less, but you do it deliberately. This prevents burnout and keeps you engaged. There is also a humility in continuing without belief. You accept that you do not fully understand the path right now. You accept that meaning may arrive later. This humility creates openness. When motivation disappears, routines become important. Not rigid routines, but stabilizing ones. Simple actions that ground you. Caring for your body, maintaining relationships, honoring commitments. These actions create structure when emotion does not. Trusting life without motivation also reveals attachment. You see how much of your effort was driven by the promise of feeling good. Letting go of that promise forces honesty. Are you willing to continue without emotional payoff? This willingness is powerful. It transforms effort into devotion. You are no longer chasing results. You are living your values. There is a calm strength in this. You are not energized, but you are steady. You are not excited, but you are present. This steadiness is sustainable. Belief fading does not mean the path is wrong. Often it means belief is being replaced by lived trust. Belief is conceptual. Trust is embodied. Trust does not need to feel good to function. Trusting life when motivation is gone also deepens compassion for yourself. You stop judging yourself for not feeling inspired. You accept natural cycles of energy. This reduces inner conflict. You also become less dramatic about progress. You stop expecting emotional highs. You appreciate small consistencies. This shifts how fulfillment feels. Remaining aligned without motivation requires discipline, but not harsh discipline. Gentle discipline, the kind that honors limits. You keep going, but you listen to your body and mind. This stage also changes how you define success. Success becomes showing up with integrity rather than achieving milestones. This reframing reduces pressure. There is also a quiet confidence that develops. You know you can continue even when things feel flat. This confidence is not loud. It does not seek validation. It simply exists. Trusting life here means trusting that meaning does not always announce itself with enthusiasm. Sometimes meaning grows in silence. Sometimes it forms beneath boredom. When motivation is gone, you may feel disconnected from your earlier self. That self was driven, passionate, intense. This is not loss. It is evolution. Intensity gives way to depth. You also become more honest about what truly matters. Without motivation to chase everything, you focus on essentials. This simplification creates clarity. Trusting life without belief also strengthens patience. You are no longer waiting for emotional confirmation. You act and allow understanding to catch up later. There is also a spiritual dimension here, faith without feeling, trust without reward. This is commitment in its purest form. Remaining aligned when motivation is gone teaches you that you are not dependent on internal weather. You can move through life without needing ideal conditions. This lesson is liberating. You are no longer at the mercy of mood. You can continue even when enthusiasm disappears. Over time, motivation may return, but it returns differently. It is quieter, less urgent, more grounded. It supports rather than drives. And when it does, you realize something important. You did not need motivation to stay aligned. You needed honesty, patience, and trust. After staying aligned without motivation, something quietly rearranges itself. You no longer feel the need to label parts of your life as mistakes. The urgency to rewrite the past fades. You stop arguing with earlier versions of yourself, and then, almost without effort, a realization settles in. The path you once judged as wrong was not a detour away from your life. It was the lesson itself. This realization does not arrive with fireworks. It arrives with calm. You look back at choices you once regretted and notice something new. They taught you things no straight path ever could. Skills you rely on now were forged there. Boundaries you hold came from those experiences. Depth you carry was shaped in moments you once tried to forget. The idea of a wrong path assumes life works like a map with a single correct route, but personal evolution does not follow that logic. It works more like training. Each environment, each role, each struggle develops a different capacity. The detour was not misdirection, it was conditioning. At the time, the detour felt like failure. You compared yourself to others who seemed more certain, more successful, more aligned. You believed you had wasted time, but what you did not see then was what you were building. Emotional endurance, discernment, self-awareness. These things cannot be taught through success alone. The wrong path often teaches you what the right one cannot. It shows you your limits. It reveals your values through discomfort. It forces you to confront parts of yourself that comfort would have left untouched. These lessons are not optional. If they are skipped, they return later in harsher forms. Many people spend years trying to correct their path instead of understanding it. They rush to compensate. They try to prove the detour meant nothing, but the detour always mattered. Ignoring it does not erase its influence. Integrating it does. The moment you realize the detour was the curriculum, self-judgment softens. You stop seeing your past as something to fix and start seeing it as something that trained you. Even the choices that came from fear taught you how fear operates. Even the times you stayed too long taught you boundaries. Even the times you left too early taught you discernment. Detours teach context. They show you how systems work from the inside. They expose dynamics you could not understand from the outside. This context becomes wisdom later. You recognize patterns faster. You see beneath appearances. You trust your intuition because it has been tested. The wrong path also builds empathy. When you have walked roads that did not fit, you recognize struggle in others without judgment. You understand how people get stuck, why they hesitate, why they cling. This understanding deepens connection. There is also humility that comes from detours. You learn that certainty is often a privilege, not a virtue. You respect complexity. You stop offering simple advice for complex lives. This humility is part of wisdom. The detour teaches patience because it rarely explains itself in real time. You have to stay long enough for lessons to emerge. This patience becomes a strength. You no longer need immediate clarity to continue. Detours also teach discernment between effort and alignment. You learn that working harder does not always mean moving forward. You learn when to persist and when to release. This discernment prevents burnout later. The wrong path often develops resilience without recognition. You keep going without applause. This builds inner strength. You know how to survive obscurity. You know how to rebuild after disappointment. There is also a creative dimension to detours. Being off the expected path forces improvisation. You learn to adapt, to problem solve, to think laterally. This creativity becomes invaluable later. Detours also dismantle ego-based identity. When plans fail, ego loses its script. You are forced to meet yourself without titles or achievements. This encounter is uncomfortable but freeing. You learn who you are beyond performance. The curriculum of the detour includes failure, but failure here is not about incompetence. It is about feedback. You learn what does not work for you. This knowledge narrows future choices in healthy ways. The wrong path also teaches timing. You see how being early or late changes everything. You respect the role of readiness. This awareness prevents rushing later opportunities. When you realize the detour was training, regret loses its grip. Regret is rooted in the belief that another choice would have guaranteed a better outcome. But life does not work with guarantees. It works with conditions. The detour created conditions you needed. This realization also dissolves envy. You stop comparing timelines because you understand that your training was specific to you. Others did not walk your path because they did not need your lessons. The detour also teaches endurance through uncertainty. You learn how to continue without validation. This prepares you for leadership, creativity, and intimacy later. There is a quiet pride that comes from surviving the wrong path. Not pride in suffering, but pride in resilience. You know what you can handle. This confidence is grounded. The moment you see the detour as curriculum, forgiveness becomes possible. You forgive yourself for choices made without full awareness. You forgive others who played roles in those chapters. This forgiveness frees energy. The wrong path also teaches you how to leave, how to exit situations with dignity, how to recognize when something has run its course. These skills are essential for growth. Detours often reveal hidden talents. You discover skills you would not have developed on a straight path. These skills later become differentiators. The curriculum includes learning what you are not willing to trade. Integrity is clarified through compromise. Values are refined through conflict. When you see the detour clearly, you stop wishing it away. You stop wanting to rewrite history. You integrate it. Integration turns experience into wisdom. This realization also changes how you approach future uncertainty. You no longer fear wrong turns as much. You trust that even if you misstep, something useful will emerge. The detour teaches you that life is not testing you. It is training you, training for what you may not know yet. But you trust that the training fits the destination. Understanding this brings relief. You stop carrying the burden of wasted time. You see continuity instead of error. The wrong path also taught you how to endure discomfort without losing your values. This strength cannot be taught any other way. You begin to see your life as a coherent story rather than a series of mistakes. Each chapter prepared you for the next. This coherence creates peace. You no longer need to justify where you've been. You know why it mattered. The moment you realize the detour was the curriculum, trust completes a full circle. You trust life not because it avoided pain, but because it used pain intelligently. You didn't take the long way because you were lost. You took it because life was shaping you for something that shortcuts could never hold. Every delay strengthened you. Every detour trained you. Every moment of confusion rewired you. What felt like resistance was protection. What felt like stagnation was integration. What felt like the wrong path was the curriculum. You learned that trust is not belief without doubt, but movement without certainty. You learned that patience is not waiting, but staying present. You learned that joy has weight, meaning takes time, and identity must dissolve before it can evolve. You discovered that life does not reward speed, it rewards readiness, and that the long way does not make you late, it makes you whole. If this message resonated, don't rush past it. Leave a comment with the words, "I trust the long way." Writing it is a small commitment, but it signals something deeper, a quiet agreement with your own life. And if you want more reflections like this, grounded, honest, and built for real growth, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. New lessons are always unfolding here. Trust life. Even the long way is the right way.